Welcome one and all. It's time for another Kings of War tournament report. Fast Abyssal Dwarves are certainly on the menu. Okay, this is the first tournament outing for the freshly buffed Abyssal Dwarves from the new Clash of Kings supplement that improved some of the lesser taken units, which allow some more diverse list building. And here is the picture of my army from the event. We have got Bart and Matt in the chat already, so clearly a packed house. And let's dive in, shall we? So, if you would like to follow Mr. Orange Arrow around the screen, and I'll guide you to the units and tell you what upgrades I've put on them. But first, this is a Cold Up North 2023. Also known as Krampus Karnage. Now, those were two separate events last year. They've been merged this year. So we've got Cold Up North event, which is it takes place at the Ribble Rumble, which is at Element Games in Stockport. And they play a lot of different game systems there. There's several different tournaments going on. And it's 2 days. And Krampus Karnage last year was 1 day, so that's kind of been rolled into Cold Up North. So you can see Krampus at the front of the army there, which is the special event miniature. Now, I painted mine from last year because I just thought it's a very nice model, and I want to have a painted one to use in my army this time, but everyone's provided with one unpainted at the event, so everyone has one. And often at events, your little special character won't be super powerful, but they'll be able to chip in with something and help you take down the enemy. In this instance, the Krampus moves around randomly, starting in the middle of your deployment area, and potentially could do nothing for the whole game. It's just on his whims. He moves with the random pointing of a dice. I think it's a D10, so whichever way the arrow on the D10 is pointing, he goes that many inches in the direction of the point of the dice. And then he administers a random effect to nearby units, so he can either cause a Vicious Aura, or Radiance of Life, or Cloak of Death. Now, Vicious Aura obviously isn't very helpful for Abyssal Dwarves, but Radiance of Life would be. Cloak of Death would obviously hurt the enemy. Now, he's treated as a member of, of your army, so the positive effects only affect your units, negatives only affect the enemy. That's if he actually keeps up. He's very difficult to kill, and you don't really get any benefit from killing him, so people aren't going to typically target Krampus unless he's in a really weird position. So, enough on Krampus, let's dive into the list. It's 2,300 points of spicy Abyssal Dwarves. And what have we got? Let's start off with things that haven't changed at all. We've got a couple of Gargoyle troops and Basusu. So I think those are the only things that haven't had any change at all in this list. And I think I like running them. There's just standard in my list building. I want some fast stuff. I need some chaff. That's what the Gargoyles are for. And Susan does a job that nothing else in the list can really do. And she kind of does a job that a lot of armies don't have access to. You've got a unit with that many attacks. She has 7, which is a significant number for an individual, who can fly around at speed 10. And she's not that easy to kill either. So an interesting role for her, she can just fly around and threaten things like cavalry on her own. So anything that relies on Thunderous Charge. So she's always going to be able to hit it first, typically, if it's cavalry. So they're going to lose their Thunderous Charge, and then on average they're probably not going to kill her when they hit her back. So she's got a good chance of outgrinding cavalry. So it's an interesting role that she has in the list. Nothing else I would really want for that job. You can take the Overmaster with wings, but he doesn't have as many attacks, and he's only Crushing Strength 1, so I don't think he's quite as good. Then, into the stuff that's changed. First of all, we've got the Immortal Guard with the Infernal Wardens upgrade, which gives them Crushing Strength 1 for only 15 points. Which is way less than most units would pay for an upgrade like that. Because often you would have to take the Brew of Strength, which is more than that. Or you sometimes get the option to increase your Crushing Strength at the cost of a point of defense. You know, like switching the shields for two-handed weapons. But that's not the case here. They just gain the Crushing Strength and get to keep their defense 5, which is very nice. Then we've got the Katsuchan Rocket Launcher, which has 4 attacks now. So it can reliably do a point or 2 of damage each turn, which is what you want from a war machine, I think. What I want from a war machine. If you're taking a battery of 3, then you're looking for more than that. But just the one for 85 points, you just want it to do a little bit of damage, maybe finish off a wounded unit later on in the game. And for 85 points, is it really worth the enemy chasing it down? Because it doesn't have significant output enough to force the enemy to put significant resources into taking it down, so they might just leave it alone. And if they do chase after it, because it's an Abyssal Dwarf War Machine, of course, it's defense 5, so it's not actually that easy to kill, even if you get loads of attacks against it. Next, we've got the 2 half-breed regiments. Now, in this list, one of them is given the Boots of Striding, which gives a decent chunk of the list Strider, and the other one is given the Helm of the Drunken Ram for an additional +1 Thunderous Charge. So, we've got some nice speed 8, pretty fast cavalry that hits very hard. Behind them, oh, by the way, the half-breeds, the main change they had, well, the only one, is that they gained a point of nerve, which was one of the things that let them down before, having nerve that was too low. So they actually get more chance to use their fury and regeneration now, because they're more likely to be alive. Then we've got 2 hordes of grotesques, and I haven't put any upgrades on them at all because I don't think they need it. Well, they're a horde for a start, so you're paying a lot if you want to upgrade them with some of the more significant artifacts, like your Brew of Strength or Sharpness. Anything like that is more expensive to put on a horde than it is a regiment. So, would they need something like that? I don't think so. They're pretty good anyway. They only hit on 4s, but they have all the special rules under the sun. They've got Strider, they've got Brutal, they've got Fury. They added Fury and Strider for only a 5 points increase on the hordes. So they've got much better on the back of that. Speed 7, so not quite as fast as the half-breeds. Quite survivable though, higher defense. And they're just very, very tasty. Much like the Grotesque Champion, who also gained special rules, Strider and Fury as well. He gained a lot of nerve, so he's only got 1 lower nerve than the hordes actually. And he's 220 points, so he's 30 points less than a horde, but of course he has Inspiring, a lot less attacks, and a smaller frontage, so you can fit more units into combat and less can fit into you, if that's something that appeals to you. So we're giving him a good field test at this event here. Then we've got, right at the back there, we've got the Ironcaster on a Great Winged Half-Breed. So, what have they done with this guy? Well, he's had some very significant changes. You can now cast 2 spells at once. So after you've cast your Fireball, you can now cast Heal or Surge with no line of sight restrictions at all. So you can cast a Fireball in front of you and you can heal a unit behind you or next to you without having to see it, which is really nice. So 2 spells, I think that's something they should do more in Kings of War, because none of the spells are game breaking and a lot of the casters aren't always a great choice, but being able to do 2 spells just nudges them into the territory of you want to stick them in your list, I would say. And this guy, I've put the Diadem of Dragonkind on him, which takes him up to Fireball 18, and I've also given it the Half-Breed Affinity, so whenever you have it within range, within 6 inches of a Half-Breed unit or Grotesque units, you get +1 casting dice, which means that it can go up to Fireball 21 or Heal 7 as well when there are enough units nearby. So I'm hoping that's going to be quite significant. It's not very good at fighting, but obviously if a flank opens up, you've still got that 20-inch charge with him. So potential for some charges later on, and hopefully he'll be a nice support to all these units here and be able to heal them up in conjunction with their regeneration. So almost everything in the list has regeneration. Almost everything in the list has Fury. So those are the main things to take away from this list. So I'm hoping not to see too much shooting, because shooting obviously doesn't care about Fury. If you're wavered from shooting, you're stuck, regardless of Fury. And what else do I not want to see in addition to shooting? Lots of speed, more speed than I have would potentially be an issue. I do have some ways to mitigate it with Susan and the Gargoyles being speed 10. But this is quite a fast list, so anything that's coming at me with just a whole army of speed could be difficult. Also, lots of phalanx could be difficult as well, because almost everything I've got is cavalry or a flyer. Pretty much all my fighty units. So that means they would be suffering greatly against phalanx, because you don't get your Thunderous Charge and you're at -1 to hit, which would cripple most of this list. So if I were to come up against, for example, lots of hordes of spearmen, that could be quite tricky. I would have to look for flanks in that case, and I have got some units that can do that, but ideally let's just not face any phalanx. How about that? Anyone that can outspeed my speedy list is obviously an issue. Anyone that can outshoot me, which is most, because I don't have that much shooting, only the 2 units, and anything that prevents me getting to the units I want to be able to fight, because I've got a lot of hammer units, but I need defense 4 on the half-breeds, 5 on pretty much everything else. So I want to be able to strike and not waste my time in combat fighting things I don't want to fight, so a large amount of chaff could potentially be an issue. If I do come up against a lot of chaff, then what I'll look to do is not necessarily kill it, and kind of reposition around the enemy and send things into it that aren't going to finish it in one go. So for example, a horde of, let's say, goblins or rat slaves, something like that, Immortal Guard or a grotesque champion are unlikely to kill something like that in one round, almost impossible, and they're also very unlikely to be killed by it when it countercharges them. So they would be a good, either of those two, even Susan or Bracky. Did I even mention those two yet? Don't think I did. I'll get back to them in a minute anyway. I think I mentioned Susan actually. So these two units here, potentially blocking up the enemy by engaging a unit I don't want to kill and keeping their more powerful units behind it. Because often when there's a lot of chaff, that means they're going to be filling up quite a lot of the table, and depending on the scenario, you don't want to spread out across the whole table. Sometimes you want to be converging on a singular point in Dominate, for example, or in some of the other scenarios where you get to place the tokens down yourself. If they're all grouped in one area, sometimes the enemy can get congested. So we can look for that and then try and work round them with the fast units. So I haven't mentioned Bracky yet, so he's in there, and he's gained Fury as well. So that's interesting. So lots of Fury. Let's see, who's got Fury? Fury, 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 Fury. Nearly all my fighting units. And all the Grotesques and the Grotesque Champion have got Brutal. Bracky has got Dread. And Krampus actually has an aura of Dread that does stack with other sources of Dread or Brutal. So if Krampus happens to be near the combat, if he randomly moves near it, then that can help as well. So, there's my list on paper, if anyone wanted to pause it to look at that. I don't think there's anything on there I've forgotten. And, oh, actually, one thing, on the Supreme Ironcaster, anytime you take an artifact that gets more value than most units get out of it, and, yes, he has Fury as well. So, when you put the Diadem of Dragonkind onto this unit, you'll see that you have, I don't even know how how to pronounce that, but the Vicious on Fireball, basically. That is going to also affect the extra attacks you get from the Diadem. So it's like giving unit more attacks when they also have Elite, for example. That's more of a buff than it would be giving more attacks to the unit without Elite. So you've already got a rule that benefits something, and then you increase the amount of that you can do. So you're getting good value out of the artifact, I think is the best way of putting it. So it's a good choice to put the Diadem on an Ironcaster, because they do get Vicious on their Fireball. And here is the list I'm facing in round 1, and we'll see if it poses any of the problems that I was anticipating being an issue for my army. And we have come up against here Orcs. We've got an Axe Legion with the Brew of Haste, putting them up to speed 6. Now anything up to speed 6 I'm not concerned about at all, because pretty much my whole army is faster than that. If we start getting above speed 6, that's when it starts to look more of a problem, especially if there's a lot of speed 8, because I've got 3 units that I would want in a fight above speed 8, or speed 8 or above. The Half-Breeds and Susan. Anyone else who is faster than that, I probably don't want them getting into too many fights anyway. So you can see here we've got a Chariot Legion at speed 8. We've got some Chariot Troops as well at speed 8. They're not obscenely powerful. The Legion obviously is very good, 20 attacks on 3s in combat. Lots of Thunderous Charge. Now my army is actually quite good at denying Thunderous Charge, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One is because I've got Chaff that can hit and just do a wound and stop you having your Thunderous Charge. Like Susan or the Gargoyles perhaps, they can probably do 1 wound to something like this. But I've also got so much Strider that I can afford to sit my units in terrain. So if you want to charge into the terrain and you don't have Strider or Pathfinder, that is fine by me. So if you do have the speed advantage, and I know you're going to choose to hit me first, and I've run out of chaff to block you with, I'll try and make you go into terrain, so you're going to be limited in your Thunderous Charge output. And of course I don't care about charging out of the terrain because I've got so much Strider going around. We've got some fight wagons, so another legion, so I've got some really big, wide units here. Lots of footprint being taken up by the orcs. The war drum, which buffs up with rallying. We've got a flagger with Bane Chant, which is fairly standard choice, along with a God Speaker with Drain Life and Inspiring Talisman, so a bit more inspiring, and Drain Life is obviously scary, taking wounds off you and putting it back onto an enemy unit. Predator on Winged Slasher, so we've got a big speed 10 dragon type unit. And then we've got a formation with more chariots, so a chariot regiment, and a war drum on a chariot. So they gain, I think they get extra thunderous charge. Is that any change? I think it is, but I think all the chariots have brutal as well. So same as my grotesques, lots of brutal being thrown around. Okay, we've got Nigel in the chat as well. Okay. List out of focus. What the devil are you talking about? So there is the first game set up, and the scenario is Hold the Line, which is one of the new Clash of Kings missions, and you can see that I've put these markers on the table. So you've got these 3 sections along the centre, you've got 1 square in the middle there. If you hold that at the end of the table via having more unit strength in there, then you get 3 victory points. There is 1 over here. If you hold that at the end, you get 2, and there is 1 down here, and if you hold that at the end, you get 2. So, interesting, there's a lot of terrain as well. It's quite densely populated with terrain, and there is a house in the middle. So as soon as I see that, and I see this bit of forest here and here, I'm thinking that's quite a difficult area for all these orcs to bring their power in, because there's a lot of things that are going to hinder their charges, take away their thunderous charge. They don't have much in the way of Pathfinder or Strider. In fact, do they have any? Let's see. Does anyone have the Boots of Striding in this list? Yes, they do. The Chariot Legion, there we go. So, the Chariot Legion, I'll show you the close-ups in a minute, but you can see that is a lot. It's a big mass of orcs, and my army seems to not take up much space by comparison. So, anytime there is a dividing line between areas of the table that you need to hold, there is, unless there's a specific tactical reason for it, there's no particular reason that you want to be out this far on a flank, or this far out on a flank, unless you need to be that far out to flank the enemy, because the area you need to be contesting is pretty much this. As long as you're kind of along these lines near the end of the game, you're going to be able to contest something. You obviously don't want to be pinned back in your own deployment zone either, which is the same for something like Push or Dominate, where you don't want to be stuck right back when you're supposed to be up there collecting tokens or being in an area, for instance. So mostly you want to be concentrating in the middle, I would say, unless your strategy is to just totally ignore one of the sections because you only need 2 to win, and set up, for example, in a box like this sort of area, so you're only really contesting this space at the end, which means you're contesting this area and this one, which would be enough to win the game. You could just ignore this one entirely. There's other ways you can go about it, but those are my thoughts on deploying when there's an area you want to control. So I've got my grotesques out there on the left. I've got my half-breeds on the hill. These are the ones that have the additional thunderous charge. I've put an Immortal Guard going up onto the hill as well, because they can definitely benefit from some thunderous charge if they get a chance to charge off a hill. We have got the half-breeds with the Boots of Strider, and the other grotesques, the Grotesque Champion, Bracky, Susan, all over here along with my caster. There's Krampus, who always deploys in the middle of your deployment area, and some gargoyles. So we've got the gargoyles behind. They're probably going to jump out in front at some point and chaff somebody up. And yep, you can see Krampus there. Got Russell in the chat, and I've put my rocket launcher all the way out on the right flank, closer to the Abyssal Dwarves on the next door table actually than to my army. All the way over there on the right, so you can't even see them in the wide shot. Oh, you can just about see it there. So the reason I've got it out there, the enemy, if they're going to divert anything to kill that, once you've killed a war machine, obviously you can spin round and face whichever way you want. So the idea of putting it all the way out there is if something wants to dedicate the resources to go and kill it, and then turn round, it's so far away from me that it won't be an immediate threat looking into the flank of my army in the next turn. That's the thinking there. And there are some quite juicy targets for a war machine in this game, because things that can be seen over hills. Let's see. There's this guy here, the big flyer. I don't know if orc chariots can actually be seen over a hill. I don't think they can, but they will have to go over that hill to actually reach me. So I'm going to have targets. And my plan is to try and make the orcs fight me over this terrain, really. And I've also got this house, which is going to prevent a bit of flanking going on, but it can also give you kind of cover to advance up on the enemy. And I've got only some grotesques out here, really, but the other two units I've got in this zone are very fast. So it might look like I've not deployed much out on this flank, but these two can definitely get there easily, as could this guy, if I wanted as well. On this flank, Susan is really the main deterrent, because things like chariot legions, while scary, quite reliant on thunderous charge. So if Susan were to hit something like that first, then that wouldn't be the best use of their time fighting her. So she's a deterrent to anything flanking me around this side. And I think with all the terrain, all my striders should give me the edge. So let's have a look down what the enemy have got set up here. So there's a small unit of chariots out there on the flank, which is probably going for my war machine. There is the fight wagon legion. There's the chariot legion. Or is it a fight wagon? Is it legion or horde? The big base. I assume that's a legion as well. So that's the fight wagon with all the orcs on the boat being pulled along by tortoises. And there is the war drum on a chariot. There is the chariot legion with the two rhinos. There is the big axe horde, or legion should I say. And there are some more chariot units and the flyer. So lots of speed, lots of killy stuff, but not a lot of strider except on this unit with the boots. So we want to be fighting over the terrain, that's the plan. And then we'll see what moves my opponent makes. So my opponent is going first and advances straight up the table with the chariots, obviously eyeing up that rocket launcher, hoping to get an early kill by charging straight for that. Everything else pretty much moves up in a line, and some chariots going around here. Now, what I'm pondering here is, how much resources will I have to dedicate on this flank? Because I don't want to break off too much stuff from my main battle line. I think if it was just a slog on open ground, I think the enemy would probably outgrind my army. Because it's got slightly more powerful fast units than I do. Chariot Legion hits harder, I think, than any of my units. So I want to fight over the terrain, but I don't want to be just going in there slugging it out with them. I'm going to try a little bit of finesse. So what can I dedicate to go over to the left against this lot? Because there's a big flyer there, which is obviously kind of scary, but these gargoyles are a good choice. So if we put the gargoyles out first, maybe, potentially to bait something into charging them, and if they don't charge the gargoyles can then like fly over them perhaps and look for flanks, or just land there and allow my other units to advance up behind them. The gargoyles are the same width as the half-breeds, so potentially they can just sit right in front of them and walk forwards with the half-breeds directly behind them, so not even any flyers would be able to hit them. So they're a good screen in that way. When you're screening grotesques with them, you probably want to be all the way up to one edge or hanging over one edge slightly, which is just going to prevent the grotesques from being multi-charged. If you put them right in the middle, then the enemy would be able to get one unit striking them on each end, potentially. So, what do I do immediately in turn one? Well, gargoyles straight up there, and if anyone wants to charge them, they're going to have to face grotesques and half-breeds who are on the hill. Immortal Guard have gone right up there. I don't care if they get charged. They're pretty damn tough, and they're also not as hard-hitting as my other units. You notice I've also got my half-breeds in a position where they can threaten either side here, because I'm not sure yet which way my opponent's going to send more forces. You would think more towards the bulk of my army, but if I turned everything to face this way, they could go in there, kill the gargoyles, and if they've got 2 units against 1 here and get the advantage and push through and start flanking, that wouldn't be good. So I want to keep my options open here. Grotesques as well can see over this way, but they're not that fast, so they probably wouldn't be able to make it all the way in here. And I'm not doing any shooting with this guy yet, because I'm just keeping him behind my lines for now. You can see with dice I've marked out the charge range of various units, so I'm staying out of it with all my cavalry, and just putting the Immortal Guard and the gargoyles in. So it's obvious bait, but sometimes it's wise to take the bait, sometimes you just need to get stuck in as fast as possible, other times not so much. So what does my rocket launcher do in the first turn? it does a single point of damage to that chariot troop that was there, and then double sixes them, and they were half an inch out of inspiring range, and they die. So first shot with the rocket launcher, first kill. Enemy unit that was supposed to be chasing the rocket launcher is now dead. Hilarious. For me. Not so hilarious for the owner of the chariots. So, the rocket launcher should be free to shoot for the rest of the game now, because who else is going to chase it, really? You don't want to be chasing it with legions of orcs when it's only 85 points. And, yeah, the war drum on chariot, you don't want to be chasing it with that, because you need that to buff your nerve for the rest of your units, so you don't want to run away. Would you run an individual, mounted individual after it? I don't think there's a particularly fighty one. So, it's going to be a bit tricky, but it's not that impactful, the rocket launcher. So, well, I say that, but it has just killed a unit with one hit, but there was a bit of luck involved in that. Turn 2 for the orcs, so let's see what they've got up their sleeve. They decide to charge the chariots over here into the gargoyles, just to prevent them from being a nuisance. Just get rid of them, get them out of the way, and willing to trade, sacrificing this orc chariot unit for the gargoyles, for sacrificing a unit for positioning, and making sure that a tool in my arsenal isn't able to get into a very annoying position later on. And all the other orcs are just advancing up, threateningly. And onto the hill, in fact, there, you can see the fight wagons. And they're actually shielding some of these other units from being hit by the rocket launcher as well, I think. So, obviously staring into the flank. Oh yeah, you'll see there that I'd put Susan out behind this building, so she definitely couldn't be targeted by anything. But anyone that came down here would be a good target for Susan to go after. As it is now, she can see the fight wagon legion, and I'm not entirely sure that's the best target for her. You'd prefer to go for chariots. I think chariots are more reliant on thunderous charge than fight wagons are. And that's the usual thing she wants to go after. Anything like a regiment of knights with thunderous charge too, but no crushing strength. That's a great target for someone like Susan. And the gargoyles get killed, obviously. And then they turn a bit. So, this unit at the back, these chariots, are not actually that close. So if I were to kill this unit and then back away, potentially I could get out their range, maybe, but if I was going to put one of these two units in there. Another thing that's going on here is that that unit at the back is one of the more powerful ones, along with this one, the two chariot units. The crummy ones, that one, and the one I've already killed with shooting. So the two powerful chariot regiments are there, and the Legion is there. So those are the main speedy threats to worry about. The Axe Legion is in the woods, pretty much everything is, so most things are going to be hindered when they hit me anyway, apart from this thing which has got the striding boots. Obviously I don't want to advance and get flanked by this thing. So how aggressive am I going to be in this turn? I'm definitely going to have to kill this unit so it doesn't charge any of my good stuff. And I can push forward my Immortal Guard right up in front of the enemy and kind of block them in so they're not charging anyone else. I can use this unit of gargoyles to do something similar as well. So let's have a look what I've got in store for the enemy in my turn 2. So Susan finds a place to land. She's actually a bit further this way, but she kept sliding off the hill. So I can see that she's probably within an inch of him, but she's actually supposed to be a teensy bit further along. So where did she come from? She came from down here, and she swooped all the way up onto that hill there. So she's in a very annoying position. That's just a God Speaker, so that's not going to attack her. No one else can see her. She's going to have a choice of who to charge off the hill next turn. So anytime you can get a flying individual into an annoying position like that, once you charge them in, the enemy can deal with them. While you're dancing around, you're just giving them more to think about. And I've put gargoyles here. My grotesque champion has gone up to the tower. Now, the gargoyles being here, and the Immortal Guard being there, and Bracky Barker charging into this chariot regiment, means that most of my units cannot be charged yet. Even though I've pushed them up, they're blocked. Because the orc units are so big, this legion can't actually get through to charge my grotesques. It can't get through to charge my half-breeds or the big flyer at the back there. These chariots can't because there's a building just there, so they're going to have to hit the Immortal Guard. I don't think anyone else can actually see Bracky, or if they can, they can't physically reach him because there's other units in the way. So for example, this legion here would like to flank him if they can see him. I'm not sure if they can. But even if they can see him, it would be very difficult for them to turn round and actually hit him because the gargoyles are there. So, very, very tricky. You can see that building being a bit of a nuisance. And my grotesques were the ones that killed the unit there. And I think I am in the charge range of the chariots there, but I've got my half-breeds on the hill as backup as well. I put a bit of damage with the rocket launcher onto the Chariot Legion, but just 3 wounds, so not much. And you can see I've got my half-breeds arranged in such a way that they're going to be able to hit this flyer if it goes into one of them, because I can't block everything, unfortunately. So if the flyer hits one of them, I'll be able to hit it with the other one. And it's unlikely to kill one of them in one round. It could do, it's got enough attacks, but it's unlikely, because I've got them inspired as well. So it's unlikely. And then it would just get flanked and immediately killed. The flyer's probably not going to want to do that. I've also got these guys who are a threat to anything that were to come in here. If those chariots there got lucky and killed the grotesques in one round. And I've just got them boxed in with just 2 of my units because they're so wide. And all my heavy hitting stuff is just waiting for any of my units to be cleared out of the way, and then they'll pile in there. So, turn 3 for the orcs. What are they going to do to retaliate? The fight wagon goes into the gargoyles. And everyone else is kind of stuck. This chariot with the war drum on it is just running away. And so the big flyer goes into the flank of the Immortal Guard, which I can live with. Because they were kind of there sacrificially anyway. And if it fails to kill them, wouldn't that be funny? Then it'd get flanked. That would be hilarious. And Bracky is going to get countercharged by that unit. The Chariot Regiment here goes into the grotesques. Is it a regiment? I think it's 3 chariot size this, so that might be a horde. So tell me if that's a chariot horde or a regiment. I can't remember now, because they changed the size of the chariots. They changed their names in the list from it was troop, regiment, horde, legion. They changed how many chariots were in some of those at some point. So there's the good chariots anyway. Go into the grotesques, will do some good damage probably. Bracky should be fine there. The enemy Krampus actually moves up a bit, but I don't think he has any major effect on things. Susan takes a bit of damage from Drain Life, I think, from this guy. And the grotesques take 5 wounds, which is clearly not enough to worry them. The Immortal Guard are killed with the flank charge, but we've got the enemy flyer landed right in the middle of the battlefield now. And Bracky takes 1 wound, so he's going to be fine. The other gargoyles take 1 billion wounds from the fight wagons and they die. So, what's the plan now? The 2 units that I threw out in front have died. Bracky has not though, so he's still there. The Chariot Legion is the unit I'm most worried about, and it's right at the back. It's currently blocked in. So, in case I somehow kill everything and let it through next turn, I may want to consider putting Susan into it to take away all its thunderous charge. That would be a move. I can do either a counter charge here with the grotesques, or I could put the half-breeds in there as well with the double charge, because the grotesques would just slide down a bit. I could put both of my half-breed units into the big flyer. I could put one of them into this unit of chariots and another one into the flyer. I could send my flyer into something to block things, or actually to contribute to damage, or I could use it to fireball a unit behind. The Grotesque Champion and the Grotesque Horde, both of which have Strider, so it doesn't matter if they're in terrain, can go for the fight wagons possibly. But then what would I be using to block up this bad boy? So, let's have a look. Turn 3. So, you can see that I get rid of the fight wagons. The Grotesques, Grotesque Champion, and Susan all combine their might and kill it. You can see where Susan was up there, so she charged in. These 2 went in as well and murdered it. So that's a very big, significant unit gone. I've turned around to make sure I'm not getting flanked by anybody, and these guys are in terrain as well, so them charging into the front of the grotesques out of terrain is not as big of a threat as you might think, because they're going to be hindered. The chariot unit at the back there, I kill that with the half-breeds here, and I think Bracky charged over that way as well to fight. And then these ones went into the flyer, these half-breeds, and did... can't see the dice, but they do some good damage. and then my grotesques countercharged into this unit of chariots there, because I'm quite confident they can do the job on their own. I've got better nerve than they do. And my flyer went up and did some fireballing into this already damaged unit of chariots, but didn't do quite as much as I'd hoped, so it's still alive, so it can charge Bracky next time. But we've cleared out significantly some big enemy threats, and the fact that Susan has landed here means that the chariots have to charge her and nothing else, because she is mighty, and nothing else is a viable target for that at the moment. The enemy are still kind of blocked and can't hit any of my good units. Obviously, if this unit overruns through Bracky, which is very unlikely that it'll kill Bracky in one go, because I think he's only on 1 point of damage, so I don't mind turning my flank to it. And also worth noting, if we go back here, I think I determined that because of the position of the flyer, it can't actually see these half-breeds that have turned away from it, so they can't get charged in the rear by it. Which, when anything's on a square base, that's obviously something you have to worry about. But I believe I got out the old thingy and checked that they couldn't be seen. Okay, moving on to turn 4 for the Orcs. Oh, a bit of a close-up of Krampus there, in all his glory, who's just been running around at the back, not really contributing. If anyone's just joined, then the Krampus, by the way, has some special rules, and he moves around randomly, and if he ends up near a unit, he might administer a buff or a debuff to them, depending if they're friend or enemy. And I think he has Dread as well, and he's very tough to kill, so there's probably no point going after him because he's so random. There is no withdraw rule in use at this event. So I think that's pretty standard across all UK tournaments now. No one's really using withdraw, which is where you can move back an inch before you declare a move order when you're engaged to the enemy. So no withdraws. So, what is the enemy going to do? Well, the Axe unit have gone into these half-breeds here in the front, which was a viable target for them. The War Drum is not that excited about fighting anyone, so it's being used to protect the rear of this unit, because the Grotesques are going to have a hard time hitting it now, especially with this positioning here. We actually determined this was the only spot really you could put it in that would prevent the Grotesques from hitting that unit in the rear, unless you wanted to charge the Grotesques, which it seemingly didn't want to do. Susan gets hit by the Chariot Legion, of course, because she's standing right in the way, and that was kind of her job there. But we've kept them out of the action. And yeah, I'm still quite confident with how this is looking, even though a lot of my units have now been hit. Let's see who survives. So the Grotesques take more damage, but they do not die. So I'm hopeful I'll be able to kill them off next turn now. The half-breeds here take 5 wounds, do not die. These ones take 9 wounds, but because they're inspired, do not die. And it was a double one anyway, but it's not a true double one because you weren't at the point of needing only 3 to kill them. Because, let's see, I don't think this unit of Orcs is brutal because they are not chariots. So getting them on 9, that means you would have needed 8 twice on the dice to kill them. So the odds are against doing it slightly. And Susan does get killed though by the Chariot Legion, but she did a decent job in this game. And that overruns. So, the situation is, I've still got all my hard-hitting units left. I've still got all 4 of these hard-hitting cavalry units, and I've got the Grotesque Champion, and I've got my caster, big monster. So, what am I looking for here? Well, I'll immediately start looking to see if my big flyer has a flank on the Chariot Legion. That would be an obvious thing to look for. It would be landing in terrain, but still worth a look. And that would get it into the action, because I might run out of shooting targets, because everything's in combat. So let's see. My rocket launcher decides there's no one to shoot at, so I'm actually going to start moving into a scoring area. Because, since they added unit strength 0 to war machines, if they're the only thing in an area, they can actually hold it. If the enemy has something in there, obviously they can't because they're worth 0, so they're definitely going to be less than the enemy. But if it's in there on its own, it can hold an area now. They can score now. They're just worth 0. So I think to make it absolutely clear, they should have probably put that a war machine is worth unit strength 0.00000000001. So that way, even if you spam lots of war machines, you still wouldn't be able to equal 1 enemy unit strength 1. I think that would make it clearer in the rules. So, double charge Grotesques and Grotesque Champion into the Chariot Legion, which just killed Susan, and Waver it, which is almost as good as killing it in this instance. I put my half-breeds back into this Axe Legion, do some damage there, and kill off the flyer with these ones. And my big flyer decides to fireball the Wardrum Chariot there. And my Grotesques do finish off the chariots out on the left flank at the second time of asking. So, the Orcs are in a bad way, this unit's wavered, and this unit's kind of sandwiched between this entire flank of my army that's undamaged, and this side, which is about to deal with them as well. Turn 5 for the Orcs, obviously all they can really do is countercharge here. And they do kill the half-breeds, but they're going to get hit by everything now. And on to turn 5 for me. So it's getting towards the end. There are no turn 7s at this event, by the way. And I think that's just to keep the games going on time. So you also score bonus tournament points up to 5. I think you get 15 for a win, 10 for a draw, 5 for a loss. Then up to 5 for the amount of kill points that you got. So if you kill almost everything, you get 5. And then up to 5 based on victory points you scored in the scenario. So that's capped at 5. So on this one you could score 7, but it would still be capped at 5. So you still want to try and hold as many victory points as possible, just in case something goes wrong. On to my turn. Chariot Legion is finished off and killed. And the Axe Legion is finished off and killed as well. I put my Grotesques and Half-Breeds and Bracky all in there. And my flyer just went down over here because I want to swoop it into this area as well, because the enemy have got some units in there at the moment. So I want to go over there and fireball them in the next turn. So, very healthy as it stands right now. On to turn 6 for the Orcs, and they can't really do much except hide behind this building because they don't really have much left. But they do manage to kill my Grotesques with the Wardrum on a chariot because they were already quite damaged there. So I then kill it with my other Grotesques, and then I fireball off, I think it was the Wardrum that was there, so that's dead as well. And the enemy are left only with I think it's the God Speaker and the Flagger, just the 2 models left, which means I'm going to get maximum points because I'm holding all the zones and killed almost everything. So maximum points in the first round. Big win. I think I successfully managed to block up the Orc army. And I had more units that I would consider to be chaff. I had the Gargoyles. The Orcs didn't really have anything that was as fast and expendable as them. So they were able to do some good blocking. The Immortal Guard did a good job blocking. And it was only a very narrow space the enemy were trying to fit through with this building here, and through the difficult terrain meant they were always limited. The line of sight, of course, being limited by forests as well, that was a factor. And just didn't let the enemy bring all their units against me in one go. Made sure they were blocked in, and that worked out nicely. On to the next round, against the Twiglet Kin. Now, people won't have played too many games against the Twilight Kin because it's a brand new army. And apparently this army was ready on day 1. I think they're all 3D printed, so that's how they were ready so fast. We have got Void-Touched Mutants. Now, the one thing that I immediately note is that there's lots of wild charge in this list, and many of the units are already fast, or fast-ish. So, these mutants with the Brew of Haste, up to speed 8, with wild charge D3. So on paper, lots of this stuff looks kind of equal to my army in speed, or a little bit slower, but actually they've all got wild charge, or a lot of them have. So the mutants, 20 attacks, hitting on 3s, reliant on Thunderous Charge, but they do have Strider. So if I want to take away Thunderous Charge, I'm going to have to actually damage them. And it's Wild Charge D3 plus 1 on this unit, because they've got the Mead of Madness. So, they're going to be quite fast and difficult to deal with. There are some Bound Phantoms, which are a flying heavy infantry at speed 10. So 15 more points than Gargoyles, but more survivable than Gargoyles, definitely. Way more survivable. And then we've got 2 hordes of Impalers, which have big shield, and they are kind of ogre type monstrous infantry horde. Would that be ogre type, or would that be more like golems? I think they're more golem sized, are they? Yeah, because I think ogres are large infantry, and these are monstrous infantry. So yeah, they're more golem sized, I think. And pretty good fighty stats. 18 attacks on 3s. Big shield, crushing strength 1, with elite and wild charge again. So slower units there, but again wild charge. Void skiffs are the ships that can shoot out of their flanks. So which makes them interesting and situational. And they do fly. So it's going to be interesting to see how they do. They do have Thunderous Charge as well, so they can hit you hard. And Mind Screech, that's the planar apparition version for healing, so if I'm plinking damage with my rocket launcher, that's not going to go too well, because they'll be able to heal it back quite easily. It's got Mind Fog as well, which could be potentially useful. There is a Navigator with Sacred Horn, which gives him more range on the auras. And Icy Breath. There are 2 Summoner Crones, one with weakness and another one with weakness. So yeah, lots of weakness being thrown around. Weakness 4 each, and I believe the weakness for these 2 can actually do damage as well, much like the Hexcaster. Soulbane on Nightmare is a large cavalry hero. So I'm trying to compare it to other units. It's kind of like the one that's below the Lord on Frostfang, that sort of thing. The Thane on Frostfang, or a Dwarf Lord on Large Beast, that sort of thing. Those are the units you'd be comparing this to. So Crushing Strength 2, Dread, Elite. 6 attacks. Yeah, fairly solid unit there. And a Bound Void Lurker, so a big, quite expensive flyer with the Pipes of Terror. And hits on 3s though with 10 attacks, not to be sniffed at all. And the scenario. You will see there that there is the centre point of the table marked. That's because we are playing Dominate. So, you may think, this is Dominate, why are there so many units deployed out on the flanks? Well, they're really just countermeasures. And if you look at all the units out there, they're all fast. For the enemy and for me. The units that are not fast are pretty much in the middle. So that's just the Immortal Guard for me, and the mutants, or the enemy, are in the middle, and the big shield dudes. And it's really the Void Skiffs and the Void Lurker that are out on the flank there. Bart says it's a tough list. Yes, it does look tough. It's got a lot of speed. It's got more speed than I do based on the Wild Charge. It hits hard. And what are any weaknesses I'm seeing here? Well, it's pretty much all defense 4. So if you can hit it, then it could have problems. The nerves aren't obscenely high on anything. There's no real massive nerves. So Susan potentially could have a field day against a list like this with low defense. She'd be wounding on 2s. And the nerve isn't so high that she wouldn't be able to worry them in the first round of combat. So could kill things if I can hit them. So I've got my rocket launcher behind my lines in this game, and you might say, well, it's Dominate, why don't you just put it out on the flank, the enemy won't chase after it. The lines of sight on the flanks are limited because there's a hill out on this side and there's a forest here. So in the middle is a perfect view overlooking the Dominate zone, apart from a small area behind this tower that I can't see, which is the same as those woods as well. So it's like 2 areas of cover in one, so it's not a particularly huge area of the battlefield that it can't see. And I can see over my own troops, so I don't mind the Immortal Guard being in front. Over on this side I've got gargoyles to jump in the way of the enemy, I've got half-breeds, grotesques, and my big flyer, so that's quite a tough force there to deal with those 3 of the enemy. And over on the left I've got a similar force, but with the grotesque champion and some gargoyles. So we've got 3 decent units there and gargoyles as chaff on each side, and then in the middle the Immortal Guard with Bracky and Susan either side, because I have to decide which way to divert them. But I can because they're fast, so being in the middle is fine. My opponent has got the Skiffs and the Void Lurker there, along with some Phantoms who are chaff just like gargoyles. Phantoms at the back there, behind the, I'm just going to call them the big shield dudes, because I keep forgetting their names, and there are the mutants, which are the scary ones. That is the planar apparition there, I think, and that is the fighty hero, large cavalry, and there are the spellcasters. That one might be a spellcaster as well, actually. Let me just look at the list. So, 2 Summoner Crones and a Navigator. I can't remember which one the Navigator is. I think it might be that one, actually, the one with more arms coming out of its back, making the other ones Summoners. While I was looking at the list, I could have just looked at the list, the big shield unit, couldn't I? Impalers, that's the one. So, turn 1 for the enemy, and look at that tape measure getting into the shot there as they move forwards. Advance menacingly, and checking arcs, making sure they're leaving things in the front arc, moving on to the hill. So enemies on the hill, this unit in particular, big threat, those mutants. They've got a long charge range and they're on a hill, so I have to actually be wary of that. And a little bit of shooting weakness damage, weakness represented by the white pebble there, and a couple of damage dished out, and same for my big fella. And these grotesques. So just plink damage, so mostly I'll be able to regenerate and Radiance of Life that back. Most of my list has regeneration, the big guy does not. Most of them do, but he does have heal and Radiance of Life as well. So I've got a really good chance to get my wounds back. Turn 1 for me, so advancing up you can see all the wounds have come back with a combination of regenerating and healing. And I'm not going into the enemy charge range particularly, only with very limited units. So I've put my gargoyles right in front of those mutants because they're obviously faster, and if I wanted to stay out of their charge range I just wouldn't have been able to move at all. So I felt I had to block them off just so I can actually advance a bit. And on this side, kind of a straight line. The hill is shrouding my half-breeds there. And as we move on here, you can see that I did a little bit of damage from shooting there on the skiffs, but not much. And yeah, just setting up, waiting, ready to pounce onto the enemy once they clear out those gargoyles. Susan has also leapt forward right in front of the enemy army, but nowhere near anything that's really a big threat to her. So on to turn 2. Phantoms leap forward to block in my 2 cavalry units, somewhat. The soul creature of some description, the large cavalry hero, charges into my grotesque champion as well, and the gargoyles are charged by the mutants. So, while they've somewhat blocked in these 2, the half-breeds still have a charge into this unit, although it would be a big shield unit, so defense 6 in the front, so not an ideal target. The grotesques don't really have another target though, so they would have to hit this thing. And on the right flank, I had positioned my grotesques just within range if this unit rolled high enough on its wild charge, which it did. And I'm not too disappointed about them charging an inspired horde of grotesques. It's the most survivable thing I've got in my list, so we'll see if they can survive that one round. And then the phantoms have moved up to hide the void lurker, so I'm not going to be able to hit the void lurker with anything. So let's see what happens as a result of those combats. Eventually, yeah, here we go. So 1 wound is done. You can see what the base is where that unit should be, but the 2 units are too pokey and keep hitting each other. So 1 wound done there, so it's fine. The gargoyles get killed on the hill, as you'd expect, and the grotesques get killed, so they take 13 damage, which is quite a lot. That's more than I was hoping to suffer, and even then, you still need to roll and get the nerve twice, and it was accomplished, as you can see, so they're dead. So not the ideal start for this flank at all. Now, of course, I could have put the gargoyles in front, but then the enemy could have spent a turn just shooting off the gargoyles, possibly, with the skiffs. So, it was a risk, though, putting it within range to where, if they roll high on their wild charge, they can hit you. But otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to go very far without throwing the gargoyles out in front. And because the void lurker was over here, then there is more speed that worries me on this side, so I don't think I could have applied the same approach I took over here, which was to box in one non-flying unit and then advance up. So onto my turn 2. Let's start to salvage this, shall we? So the gargoyles charge into the mutants that have just killed my grotesques just to block them in for a turn. And the half-breeds kill the phantoms, and this big guy, my Ironcaster, just gets into position so he can't be hit by anything, and then fireballs the Void Lurker. Bracky charges into one of these units, and my Immortal Guard move up to box the other one in. So Bracky actually does some wounds there. The mutants on the hill, I don't want them to have any access to Thunderous Charge, especially if they're going to be charging off the hill, so Susan charges in and does some damage to them, and wavers them, which is great. It's really good news. I flank charge this guy with the grotesques, that's about the only thing they could do. And yeah, double one. Look at all that damage they did between the grotesque champion and the grotesques. I decided not to send grotesques into the unit in front. I decided to send them into the flank here, and the half-breeds went in and killed the unit in front because I did not want to engage this unit yet. I thought I'll block them off instead rather than throwing half-breeds into them who aren't going to kill them. I at one point did ponder throwing them in with Susan because she wouldn't have been in the front, so she could have helped finish them off potentially, but I don't think I would have killed them in one round still. So I preferred to have Susan to hit this unit, and it's very lucky I did, because wavering that unit means that this ridiculous double one here is not going to get me flank charged by the mutants off the hill, because that would have just been game over. If I'd got that double one and then not wavered this unit, that would definitely be game over next turn, sadly. But as it is, still got a chance. Had I not double one that unit, I would now have these two facing the enemy who had wavered, so this whole area of the battlefield I think I would start mopping up. As it stands though, I've still got to fight that thing for another turn, because the enemy have obviously got this side more in the bag. Turn 3, so this guy decides to countercharge the grotesque horde rather than the champion. Oop. And over here, the Void Lurker flies away, decides it's not needed on this half of the table, so then the skiffs double up into the half-breeds, and the mutants go back into the gargoyles. So that guy is a big threat now. However, he's on 5 wounds, so I can shoot at him, and potentially get enough for a waver. Over here, you can see that these wavered guys here have actually got a wound back, I think. And the Impalers are charging into the Immortal Guard, and these ones have countercharged Bracky. And weakness has been applied to this unit, as you can see there. So, not much damage is done here, but this guy's done his job after being double one. Just held them up for one turn longer than warranted. Mortal Guard takes some damage, but they're alright for now, holding steady. Bracky gets wavered, but he does have Fury, so he's going to be able to hit them back. Which is kind of annoying, because what he wanted to do, once this unit had exposed its flank by charging the Immortal Guard, Bracky wanted to charge in there and hit the non-big shield unit. So it's not as big of a deal for him, because he is crushing strength 3, so he's still wounding them on 3s with Vicious, but still, it would have been easier to wound them on 2s with Vicious over here. Gargoyles are dead there. The half-breeds, what happens to them? They also die, so this big guy is on his own. Now, would I just charge straight into one of these units and then die? No. I'm going to fly away and not engage them at all. So we'll see exactly where I go in a minute, but there's no point hanging around here. The dominate zone is here, and the enemy are out there with half the game remaining, so they should be able to get back in time. But my one unit is no threat for them, so the best thing I can do is just get out there and be a threat later on. Because the actual killing of units is not going particularly smoothly after this double one situation here. Because if you think about it, if we were going into my turn 3 without that unit there, I would have probably would have moved him forwards or backwards to allow them to pivot. Then they could have both gone in and killed that, or I could have flanked the Impalers maybe. So yeah, it would have been looking very, very solid. As it stands, this unit of half-breeds look like they have a flank there, so that's going to be a juicy option potentially. Let's see. So I do some damage here. I bring Susan over actually to charge into this guy just to make sure he can't hit anybody else. I think that was my best bet rather than shooting it. So Susan gets in there, does damage, now it can't fly over me and hit somebody else. The rocket launcher wavers some mutants, which is great. And I think it is these ones here. So, I mean, it's not that amazing because they were facing the wrong way anyway, so it doesn't cost them that much. My Ironcaster flies over and just stares at this guy. So let's go back, you can see exactly where I fly to. I fly from there to there, just to get out the way of all these units. And do some damage to those units. I go into the mutants on the hill with the half-breeds. And let me go back. So, because obviously I don't attempt to take on a flank here. Now, that flank looked open, but I didn't take it because Susan was going to go and block this guy in. So the mutants were going to be fresh on the hill, and I felt I had to hit them with something. These two were fighting this guy, so it wasn't really an option to go and attack them, I think. Now, let's see, could it actually have been an option? So, let me go back again. The Grotesque Champion is facing that way. So, I don't know whether he would have been in range, because he would have been able to see the mutants on the hill over this guy. So, obviously, he would have been a choice to go in there and hit them in the front and take away their Thunderous Charge, meaning the half-breeds could charge that flank. And Susan could still be used to block him in. So there must be some reason I didn't do that. Maybe he was out of range. It doesn't look out of range from here, but he might be. I'm not going to rule that out. But that was definitely something worth looking at there. But I actually end up going round him and standing here, just to get out the way, because it wasn't required to go into combat. And in case I double-wand him again, I didn't want both units staring at him. Grotesques do finish him off this time and then turn around to face the middle, of course. Half-breeds go in there and they waver that unit of mutants again. And Bracky and the Immortal Guard do some damage there. Susan holds them up. So, not a bad turn, all in all. Turn 5 for the Twiglets. So this wavered unit of mutants turns around. The Skiffs are chasing after the Ironcaster, but they can't charge him, of course, because they weren't facing him. And counter charges go in here. And weakness is cast onto these half-breeds. Immortal Guard are dead. And Bracky takes some wounds. And is dead as well. So those two units are dead, but what have I got to hit back with now? So, half-breeds, Grotesque Champion, Grotesques, Susan. Bart says, do those two individuals make your list work? I think they are very important to the list, but that could just be a personal playstyle thing. I like using Susan a lot for reasons I've gone into in the past, so you don't have other options in the list for something that hits hard and can charge in any direction and is that fast. So landing in amongst the enemy in a position where she can't be hit and she can pick and choose who to go after, I think that's a very important tactical tool that she uniquely gives to the Abyssal Dwarves. There aren't a lot of factions that can do anything the same as that I can think of. I just can't think of any other individuals that are as fast as Susan and hit as hard as she does. I can't think of one off the top of my head, so she might be a unique unit in the game for that. So it's a role that you can't replicate, so if that's part of your strategy, I think she is the obvious choice. Bracky has a lot of special rules. He hits hard. It's only 6 attacks though, but he does have Dread, so that's kind of 1 auto damage, kind of. And he's got very inspiring as well. So he's just a solid. And they don't get killed very easily on the counter charge either. That's an important thing for an individual. You want to be able to hit something and not immediately die when you hit back if you're being used in that role. So I do like them both a lot. I've experimented obviously at times without those two, or with just one of them, and I generally miss Susan more when she's not there, because I spot things. I spot an area of the table I could land with Susan that you can't do with anyone else. And she is greatly missed when not present. I do think she's not totally optimal for the points. She doesn't have Vicious, so even though she can hit hard, she's more susceptible to a bad round of hitting than most other units in the army. So it can happen, but I still think she's worth it because nothing else does the same job. Even if she was cheaper or more expensive, I don't think I would have too many more complaints, because it's just a unique role that nothing else fills. Okay, so it's not looking too great here. If I did have all the tools that I could have had I not hit that double one, I would have hopefully killed at least 2 of these units in the last turn. But as it stands, we've now lost quite a few in the centre, and it's time to hit back with Fury. So turn 5. Susan goes back into the Void Lurker because I can't afford that thing to be hitting any of my units in the middle. Krampus wanders in between them, which means he adds dread to them, which means I'm able to waver this unit of mutants again. My flyer lands behind these 2, so let me see where I was. I was here, I charged into the planar apparition and killed it, and then turned around to face their rear. So I've got my flyer in a good position. I was able to move 20 because of that, meaning I'm now out of range of the skiffs, and I'm in the scoring area, and I'm facing the rears of the enemy units. So I think that's quite a nice move there, taking this thing and turning to face them. And I also managed to kill off the unit on the hill finally, after wavering it a few times. And I've positioned my half-breeds so they can't be hit by anything. The Grotesques have these guys in the front. And you can see, even with that double one, I'm amassing supremacy in the middle here against these 2. But this is Dominate, so how many points am I actually going to be able to get in the middle? Because I've lost quite a few units now. I've got unit strength 2 there, 1 there, 3 there, and 3 there. I think the half-breeds are 3. The enemy have got quite a few over there. They've got more high unit strength units than I do. So I'm going to have to kill more stuff by the end if I'm going to have any chance. But these guys being wavered means they can't actually get into the centre to contest it now in turn 6, which is important. So let's see what the enemy can get into the middle in turn 6. So they charge the Grotesques with these Impalers. The other ones just turn around so they're not getting flanked. And the Skiffs make sure they're in the scoring area, but the Mutants, as I said, can't. They take out the half-breeds with this individual. So the half-breeds are dead. So that could be game over right there. Because going into my turn 6, what do I need to do now? So I need to reduce the enemy to 6 unit strength for me to get a draw out of the game. 6 unit strength in the middle. The Skiffs are already in there. So I need to kill both of these Impaler hordes that are mostly undamaged in one go. Now, my caster, Ironcaster, has a flank charge of this one. So I'm confident that the Grotesques in the front and him in the flank could do a good job killing that. But that would mean the Grotesque champion in the front here and Susan in the rear there. Would that be enough between the 2 of them? That's very spicy, very close. I don't know whether they would be able to do it. The other option is to throw everything into this unit and sidestep this guy into the flank there and then fireball them and shoot the rocket launcher at them. They're already on 2 damage, but is that going to guarantee enough damage? Because I'd be hitting on 4s with the fireball, which is on average going to be 9 hits, so probably 4 or 5 damage. This thing's probably going to do 1 or 2 wounds as well. That's probably not enough on average, so I think I need to hit them in combat as well. Does this guy have a flank on the Impalers here? Would that be a better option? I need to kill both of them, and because the half-breeds got killed, then I don't really have all the tools to make it easy. So let's see. The Grotesque champion does have a flank there, and the Grotesques go in the front and kill the unit. At the top, Susan goes into the rear, and the Ironcaster charges into the front. And because the Ironcaster going into the front isn't as big a deal, because it's got Crushing Strength 3, I do 9 damage, and I am 1 away from removing that unit from the game on the nerve test. Wow, wow, wow. So, had my Krampus been up there, had he randomly moved in that direction the whole game, they would have been dead. Had I put a grotesque unit into them, and therefore had brutal, they would have been dead. Which is one argument for putting one of the grotesques into each combat. But I don't think this guy, would this guy in the flank have hit as hard as the grotesque champion in the flank? I don't think so. The grotesque champion hits on 3s, he hits on 4s. So the grotesque champion would have done more damage, and I think I only just killed this unit, so it's very possible I wouldn't have even killed the unit if I'd put this guy in there. So I just didn't have the tools to make it easy, unfortunately, so I was only able to get one unit killed. If the half-breeds had survived the previous turn, I think I would have killed them all, and that would have led to a win, in fact. Although I may still taken damage in combat from this thing, so I would have had to charge him. So, but their unit strength would have then been in the game, which would have got me, even if I just killed one of them, probably got me a draw. So, as it was, it's a loss, but almost a draw, down to the last dice roll, couldn't quite do it, and obviously the earlier double one wasn't great. This flank didn't go particularly well, this flank was looking great, except for the double one. So really, what should have happened is that we should have just annihilated one flank each, because the enemy obviously did get through this one. They had more useful resources over there than I did. I had more useful resources here than the enemy did. So I dominated this flank, the enemy dominated that flank, then we meet in the middle. But as it was, I had lost more, and the enemy had more undamaged or low damaged units that were able to reach the centre before the end, sadly, because of that double one. So, could have been a draw, but it's a loss. Moving on to the next round, and Varangur. Don't see a lot of these around. They have a combination of some of their own units and some Northern Alliance looking units, like your Snow Trolls for instance. So the Fallen are often compared to the likes of werewolves. They're almost as fast, and they are also large infantry. So not quite as fast as werewolves, but they do have, let's see, they've got Iron Resolve. One of the units has been given Elite and the other one has been given Vicious. So they're quite hard-hitting and fast. Snow Trolls, 2 hordes of those. And as with all trolls, they've got quite a big waver gap, so they get wavered quite a bit. They've got a bit of wild charge as well, which makes them... probably doesn't affect this particular matchup very much, because I'm still faster than them even with their wild charge. They do regenerate, they do have good crushing strength, because they are trolls after all. And they are vicious. Mounted Sons of Korgan, so speed 8 cavalry unit with the Helm of the Drunken Ram for extra thunderous charge. So, as I said though, my army is pretty good at shutting down thunderous charge, and this is a good unit. If you wanted to look at an example of a unit that Susan would want to go after, maybe something like this, with thunderous charge 2, that it would be losing, of course. On the other hand, they do have crushing strength without the thunderous charge, and they do have brutal as well, which makes them slightly better at dealing with the likes of Susan, who might want to get in their way. 2 Cavern Dwellers, who are high nerve monsters and random attacks, but they do hit on 3s with crushing strength 3, so they're actually pretty terrifying. 2 Magus with Lightning Bolt and Drain Life or Bane Chant. So, draining life, obviously, comboing with regeneration, so you can get more wounds back. 2 Thanes on Frostfang, who are kind of an inexpensive version of the Lord on Frostfang, but 13-15 nerve, so it's quite low, really, for a unit of that type, speed 7. So they're kind of similar to how the Grotesque champion used to be. Very similar stats. So they're okay, they're not that expensive. And there is a Snow Troll Prime as well. So, that's been given the Blade of Slashing, so kind of like a Troll Bruiser. Just a decent fighting monster hero. So, let's look at the mission. It is loot. Oh, by the way, the scoring for the last game, because I had so much unit strength in the middle, I was actually able to score the maximum number of bonus victory points. And I killed a reasonable amount of stuff, so I was able to score quite a good amount of points despite losing the game, so I'm still up there in the table at the moment. So this is loot. and all the tokens are in a very small area, so we're barely even using this half of the table. And is that good for me or not? Well, the enemy has got a bit of a slower core than I have, which I should say, with the trolls, the snow trolls, and the cavern dwellers are a bit slower than my units for the most part. So maybe they don't want to spread out too much. On the other hand, when the table sides were chosen, okay, what I should say is, the table sides weren't chosen, but I assumed that the table sides would stay as they were, because generally players don't like switching sides once they've put their stuff down, unless there's a huge tactical advantage to it. So I was on this side. I was thinking my opponent's probably going to be on that side, because either I win the roll-off and I just pick this side anyway, or my opponent wins the roll-off and there's a chance that they'll stick with this side regardless because all their stuff is over there. So I quite like the idea of there being tokens with this building in the way. It's going to be easier to congest the enemies, as you saw in game 1 with the orcs. When there's a building there, it's difficult for the enemy to get multi-charges in on you compared to open ground, and you can block up their units behind each other, especially with this quite solid mass they've got going on here. It potentially cause a blockage with a bit of luck. So, the scoring in this one, because there's 3 tokens and you can score 5 bonus tournament points for victory point scoring, for tournament point purposes each one is worth 2, but it's capped at 5. So, let's have a look at my setup. We've got Susan, Grotesque Champion, Grotesques and Gargoyles all on this side. And then we've got another solid mass of my troops there. And out on this side we've got a couple of fast units and the rocket launcher. The enemy have got some Fallen and a Thane on Frostfang out on their flank. All the trolls and some more Fallen in the middle. Snow Troll Prime, Cavern Dwellers, Sons of Korgan, and another Thane, and the individuals hanging out there. So, I go first, and I think I take the first turn. My opponent then told me that he would have made me go first as well, so both of our game plans involved me going first, which is interesting. I want to get onto the tokens, because when you've got an enemy army that's kind of stacked like this, with units behind the other, when it comes to loot, you have to be wary to not let them get the token and then drop it to a unit behind them who then start running away. Because these units do have good nerve, the Cavern Dwellers and the Snow Trolls, quite good nerve, tough to kill. So, I don't want to be chewing through them for the whole game and then chasing down a unit that's run off with the tokens. So I was conscious of getting up towards the centre line early. So Bracky has gone right onto the hill. He has put himself within charge range of the Fallen. He's okay with that. If he has to die, that's fine, because I think the half-breeds would then immediately kill the Fallen straight afterwards. And I'm kind of willing to do that trade. I think they're a really big threat. And over on this side, we've got the cavalry and a Thane there. So I've got Gargoyles, who can be thrown in front of both of those, potentially. And Susan, who is projecting more speed than they have. So if they want to come into Susan range, she can quite happily charge either of those units, and I'm confident she would take either one of them. Maybe I shouldn't be that confident, but that's how I feel. Grotesque Champion in front, because I can throw that at something as well through a smaller gap, maybe with my other units involved, because I'm probably going to be fighting along this sort of line if the enemy advance up, and then I get some charges in. I've got the Immortal Guard on the hill, as I mentioned before. Probably a decent unit to be on the hill. They're not that fast, but if the enemy want to come closer and I get a charge off from there, I'll get thunderous charge out of it. Bit of damage done to a Cavern Dweller at range. And that's about it. There's Krampus lagging behind the army as usual, with his random movement. Turn 1 for the enemy. So, the Fallen goes straight into Bracky, and the Thane goes up behind them. And everything else goes up into the middle. They're being very aggressive, and these Cavern Dwellers are obviously saying, come and charge me. Now, I don't mind this unit being in difficult terrain because I've got 2 sources of Strider right here. One's got the boots, the Grotesques just have it inherently. And let's see if Bracky survives. Well, there's a bit of shooting actually, so the Grotesque Champion takes a wound, and then Bracky gets wavered with Fury, which is great, so he can countercharge. Yeah, I think on average, Fallen probably should wave a Bracky. That's probably about the average result. And now they're probably going to get flanked by my half-breeds there. So they should die. I've then got 2-on-1 against the Thane. This unit of Fallen at the back are a concern. I would like to block them in with something, but they are nimble. So if you're going to block in a nimble unit, you have to be careful with your positioning, because it is possible, it's just more difficult. Because you might hear nimble and think, well, how can you possibly block them in? But they only get 2 90-degree pivots on the charge. So if you can use angles and position yourself in such a way that they would have to pivot more than 90 degrees to reach the unit behind, then you can block them. Turn 2 for me. So the Fallen are toast, as you'd expect, on the hill. And my half-breeds have exposed their flank to the Fallen up there. So what have I done to stop this? Well, I've charged them with gargoyles. And that's one way to stop a unit. Since there is no withdrawing mechanic, then they can't just back off an inch and then nimble charge around you, because they're not square, so they are stuck. And I've put the grotesques into the snow trolls. Done 7 wounds, quite happy with that. I've put the Immortal Guard off the hill and the half-breeds into the Cavern Dweller, 10 damage, which isn't a huge amount. These grotesques have just moved up onto this wall there. Gargoyles and my caster hanging back is just fireballing over the top. And does some wounds to those snow trolls, and my grotesque champion goes into the snow troll prime there. And 4 damage. So what's going to happen back to me now? Oh, just have to cough for a moment. So the cavalry are jammed in. Susan also charged this Thane, by the way, and did some wounds because the cavalry have gone over here, so she's not worried about being double hit. So she's going to outgrind him quite easily. Cavalry aren't going to hit me, they're blocked in. Snow Trolls are kind of blocked as well because there's these 2 units that I don't think they can actually pivot enough to fit into the Grotesque Champion because the building's there as well. And most of my stuff is safe from being hit back. Most of it. Now, the Gargoyles against the Fallen, they're obviously going to die. This guy, will he charge Bracky? He's already on 6 wounds. On average, would a Thane on Frostfang kill Bracky, who's already on 6 wounds? I'm going to say that on average, he would come very close to killing him in that situation. But if he doesn't, he gets flank charged and immediately killed. So on that basis, he may choose to charge into the half-breeds and not take the risk. Turn 2. So Krampus moves, shuffles a little bit. Snow Trolls back into the Grotesques. This Thane here, hold on, let me show you where he is. He was there. So instead of charging either of these, he decides, you know what, I'm nimble, I'm just going to go and charge your war machine. And not a bad choice. If you kill it and then turn around, you're suddenly a big threat. So I was thinking Bracky is going to have to come back here and charge him. In that case, if he kills the war machine and turns around. But because he's nimble and square, Bracky charging him isn't necessarily that big of a deal to him. So he could be a big threat from that position, potentially. And lots of counter-charging, as you'd expect. Lots of units are stuck, though, because of this building and because of the tight, compact combat area. And that's one issue when you go in with this very compact fighting force, just going forward in a block. Your units can get jammed behind each other. So not all of them get to fight. Grotesque's not taking much damage. Susan not taking much damage. The rocket launcher only takes 4 wounds because of an abysmal attack roll and then doesn't die, meaning this guy's now facing the wrong way, facing a rocket launcher. So that's a really bad time for him. The Gargoyles do get killed, though, by the Fallen, as you'd expect. And then they back up so that they can't be hit by Bracky, because he would be a good guy to pin them down as well. But then, so that the 2 damage the Grotesques took was drain life. They then took a ton more. The Snow Trolls have a really good round of attacks and actually kill them in one go. Which was unexpected, but okay. We can live with that. The Cavern Dweller does some wounds to the half-breeds and wavers them, but it's okay because they've got Fury. And yeah, apart from that, not too much drama. Turn 3 for me. So, I just ignore this guy and the half-breeds just face that way. And Bracky charges into the flank of the Snow Trolls with the Gargoyles in the front because I'm blocking them in from hitting anyone else. And the Fallen, I charge their flank with my flyer. Now, I'm hoping that I would have actually wavered or killed them to stop them chasing after my half-breeds, but I don't quite manage that. The grotesques on the left flank behind the building just shuffle a bit to pick up the token off the ground, which they're going to happily carry around for the rest of the game now. And Susan kills off the Thane and then overruns, so she's now looking into the flank of the enemy. So she is now a big threat, especially to cavalry. And wouldn't you know it, I double one the Cavern Dweller. Now, I'd done 13 wounds to it, so is it a true double one? What's the Cavern Dweller's nerve? Wasn't it about 16 or 18 or something? So not quite a full-on double one, if that's the case, if that's how much damage it was actually on. I get these guys up to 10 damage, so heavily damaged these units, but not finished them off yet. And here, took the flank charge with the big flyer, 7 wounds, but don't quite finish them. Krampus is trying to leave the table, it looks like, because he's randomly moving towards my board edge, so he's not going to affect the game at all. And the Grotesque Champion went into the horde of trolls there and did some damage and is boxing them in, along with the cavalry. And the Immortal Guard went in and finished off the Snow Troll Prime. Now, as I was browsing the images earlier, I think I might have accidentally cheated here, because... let's go back. Okay, is that the right image? Where's the time I might have accidentally cheated? Let's see here. Okay, I think this is it. So, in my turn after this, the Grotesque Champion charges the Snow Troll Prime. I'm not sure if I should have been able to see him because of the height of this Cavern Dweller. And I don't know if I checked it with the laser, because there was some confusion at the start of the game over the heights of the enemy units. I think my opponent was under the impression that all these guys were the same height, or I was under the impression, and we were a bit confused over who could see over hills and who couldn't, which is something I like to clarify at the start of every game. Because Snow Trolls, because of their base size, you would think they'd be the same as Greater Obsidian Golems, for example, or Grotesques, but I'm not sure. They might actually be lower than that, or the Cavern Dwellers might be the same height as him, or the Snow Troll Prime might be lower, but either way there was some confusion over heights, so I may have been under the impression that the Grotesque Champion was taller than all of these guys, and therefore just declared a charge on the Snow Troll Prime, even though I'm not sure if I could actually see him. Looking at this picture, I may have been able to see him anyway, but I don't think I checked, because if the centre's there, it would have been close if I'd got the laser out. It's hard to see from that angle. Is there a better angle? Oh yeah, how about that? Okay, yeah, I think I can see him. I think that's good. Okay, I'm no longer a cheat. Are we happy with that? Happy I can see the Snow Troll Prime there. It's vaguely close, but I think, based on that angle, I think I can see him. I can live with that. Okay, onwards. Back to where we were. Okay, Krampus running away, and... here we go. So, enemy turn 3, and the Fallen go into the half-breeds, as you'd expect, because they weren't killed. Their damage dice haven't followed them yet, so it looks like they're fresh, but they're not. The Cavern Dweller goes back into these half-breeds again. Snow Trolls will go into the Gargoyles, and, well, look at that. The half-breeds are dead, and now the Fallen have turned round to face me, so I'm going to have to use Bracky to block them in. And the Thane does kill off my rocket launcher this time and then turns around to face the battle, so he's lost a turn. And what's this? The Gargoyles get double wand, paying me back for not killing this guy. Okay, this is more of a serious double one because they're Gargoyles. So yeah, that's a full-on mega double one of doom that you really don't want because it's a crummy unit and you can't afford to be blocked by them for another turn, but that's what's going to happen, baby. Look at that. Sweet, sweet double skulls. And there's a double one rolled here as well, but it's more of a comedy one because it's nowhere near actually killing the unit. And we just thought it was funny that you rolled double one twice in a row. So, it's a mixed bag, but I'm confident. You can see the knights have followed behind this guy, by the way. Because what he was doing, obviously, was charging into the flank of the Fallen, which is why he's looking in that direction. So if he wants to dodge them, he's going to have to find somewhere else to go now. Now, you can see I've got Susan there who can chase down that cavalry, so she's going to be a good choice. Now, on to my turn 4. So my flyer just moves out of their charge range. Susan charges them in the rear. Bracky charges into the Fallen to lock them down or maybe finish them off, which he clearly does not. But he does waver them, so that's good enough. The Immortal Guard and the Grotesque Champion finish off the unit here, which is... let's just go back and look. It's the other Snow Trolls there. The Cavern Dweller is killed by the Half-Breeds. These Grotesques haven't even had to fight yet. They've just held a token, and now they're just providing backup. The Half-Breeds have picked up a token as well. And it's all looking very healthy, because the Gargoyles, obviously, still boxing in these Snow Trolls. So the enemy have got one unit that can't charge anything, one that's blocked by Gargoyles, and one that's wavered. And some individuals running around. So, and this guy who can't charge anything, actually he might be able to charge Bracky. I think that's the only thing in his range, because Bracky was hoping he would finish off the Fallen and then back away. So he would have been out of range. Turn 4, so the Fallen do move backwards and then charge into Bracky with the Thane. And, yep, the Fallen pick up a token, by the way. Just taking a picture showing that they have the token. So they've got one, I've got two at the moment. And some individuals running around doing shenanigans. The Gargoyles are very likely to get killed. You can see the Snow Trolls have got some of their wounds back, I think. How much had they taken earlier? Oh, maybe they hadn't. Maybe they didn't get any back. Oh yeah, they do. There you go. So they're down to 4. And then 2, it seems. So, yeah, lots of wounds back for them. And some damage on Bracky from the Thane. Doesn't kill him. Gargoyles are dead this time, but it's going to be too late to save their Snow Troll hides. And, yes, that's how that turn ends. What are we going to do here? Well, my Ironcaster is now thinking, you know what, there's a really juicy unit of Fallen there. And they're on 10 damage, and I have Fireball. That sounds like a winning combo to me. So he's going to fly over here, try and fireball them to death. Susan can charge into the Knights there. I could maybe put the Grotesque Champion into them as well. I could put Grotesques and Half-Breeds into the Snow Trolls. I would have to drop the token though. The Immortal Guard could charge in there, or they could stop and pick up the token that the Grotesques leave behind if I just drop it there. And so, in the end, I decide I don't need to drop the token at all. So the Grotesques just pick that one up, which was on the Half-Breeds. So the Half-Breeds were holding a token. They chose to just charge off instead. And, hold on, where did they go? So they actually charge in here. But to be in range, they had to let go of their token. So the Half-Breeds charge into the Knights up there. They drop the token, the Grotesques go and pick it up. The Grotesque Champion charges into the Snow Trolls. Bracky charges into the Snow Trolls as well, and the Immortal Guard are just shuffling, because I'm thinking, you know what, I've got the tokens, I don't need to be overly aggressive, I just need to keep the enemy in my clutches, don't hit them with units that have tokens, because I could just roll horribly and fail to kill them, and then they hit me back and steal the tokens off me, so I'm just going to play it safe. So the Half-Breeds and Susan get the job done on the Knights, and then turn around to face the action again. The Ironcaster fireballs off the Fallen there, so we've still got the Thane to worry about. But it's looking good overall, not much left for the enemy. And what are they going to do in their turn 5? Well, the Thane runs off with a token. And so the token was actually here, because the Fallen were holding it. The enemy, their dilemma now, is do you try and kill some of my units, or do you pick up a token and try and get 2 bonus tournament points out of it? You have to hold the token and survive, though. That's the big thing. So they decide, you know what, picking up the token might be the best choice there. And some damage is dished out from spells onto Bracky. Not much else. Turn 6 for me, what can I do? Obviously everyone's going to pile in and murder the Snow Trolls to death. Except for whichever unit has my tokens. Because that would be a pointless risk. Because as I just said, it's going to be my turn 6. The enemy has 1 turn left. If I double 1 this unit, and then my unit with tokens is right in front of them, they could countercharge them and steal the tokens off me in turn 6. So I'm going to put the tokens down with the Grotesques, charge in there, charge the Half-Breeds in, the Immortal Guard will then just step onto the tokens and pick them up. And that will be all good. Then we need to hit this guy. So what have we got? We've got my Ironcaster who can fly and fight there. We've got Bracky, and we've got Susan at the back, who can see him over everyone else because he's taller than my cavalry. So those three are going to go and try and kill him, and then I'll grab the token there. Which is what happens. So dies, grab the token there, kill everything apart from an individual, and another large win. So 2 large wins, and a very creditable loss. And my opponent doesn't accomplish too much in turn 6. So there you go. End of game. Krampus did nothing, but was unnecessary. Going into the next round. Now, I'm still quite near the top of the table now, over those two wins with pretty much maximum points, and 1 loss where I scored a lot of points as well. Now, let's see. Okay, going into push now. So, this scenario is push, and we're against elves, elf scum. So let's have a look at the list. We've got a regiment of Palace Guard with 2-handed weapons, so they have some crushing strength. All the elves are elite in some way. We've got Kindred Tall Spears. So one of the things I wanted to watch out for was phalanx. There are some regiments of those, so that's always a worry to me, since I've got an entirely cavalry and flyer army, of course. We've got the Sea Guard, who are a shooty unit, and it's a horde of them, so 25 shots, and they hit on 4s, which isn't that common in this game. So they're quite scary, of course. Stormwind Cavalry, Speed 9 Cavalry, so they're scary with the Boots of Striding, so it's going to be difficult to stop them. But what do we see here? We see Thunderous Charge 2, and no crushing strength at all. So that's the perfect Susan unit, because she's faster than them, and that's a unit she can shut down. Now, it's risky, because they hit on 3s with elite, so they're going to get a lot of hits against her, but they'd be wounding her on 5s, so I'm pretty confident Susan would outgrind this unit, even though she's got way less attacks than them, because she's going to hit them first, basically. There are Draken Riders. Now, this is definitely the unit I'm most concerned about, because Brew of Haste, Speed 11. I have nothing that fast, of course. Crushing Strength 1, Thunderous Charge 1, 18 attacks on 3s with elite. Very scary. They are likely to hit and kill something. They are also nearly 300 points. So it's a big points investment, but they're very powerful. If I can shut them down, that's going to be one step towards winning. We've got an Elven King, who is on a horse, so is also fast, and is pretty spicy. We've got an Elven Archmage with Lightning Bolt 7, thanks to the Boomstick. And we've got a couple of Standard Bearers, one with Bane Chant, Flute of Insatiable Darkness, one with the Pipes of Terror, and just the one attack, but Pipes of Terror. I don't think I've seen that as a combo, but interesting. And they have an Aura of Rampage, Melee 3. So Rampage, of course, gives you more attacks against infantry and basic cavalry, I think. Then we've got 2 big, expensive dragons with Dragon Breath, but most importantly, 10 attacks on 3s, Crushing Strength 3, with elite. So they're as hitty as the Abyssal Dwarf Overmaster on Ancient Winged Half-Breed, except they also have a breath attack. So, what are the issues in this list? Well, it's got more hard-hitting, fast stuff than I do. It does the things I want to do better than my list does. It's got cavalry that are faster than all my cavalry. It's got flyers. It's got 1 unit of flyers that are faster than everything in my army. What does it not have? It does not really particularly have chaff. So that is one thing that might be in my favour. So I'm going to be able to use my gargoyles and not get out-chaffed. I can't just throw the gargoyles out in front immediately because they'll get shot to death. And then I don't have chaff anymore. So my units are fast enough so that if I put the gargoyles out in front, if the enemy want to move forwards and dragon breath the gargoyles off the table, then they have to put themselves within my charge range to do that, which they're probably not willing to do. So, what is my plan here? There is this little fortress of elves in the corner. There's the push token in the middle there, by the way. And with the changes to push, you can only score with 1 token per unit. So if a unit is carrying 3 or 6 or 1 token, it's all the same. They still only score for one of them, so you have to spread the tokens out at least at the end of the game. Doesn't matter at the start because you're not scoring then. So there's this little block of elves with some phalanx in there, which is scary, but I do see the knights are out not behind the phalanx, which means there's a chance for Susan to get into them, potentially. And all the flying stuff is out here. So what am I going to do about that? Because if that flanks my army, I lose, I would say. If it charges anything behind me, looks into the rear of my army, I lose. So I want to deter them. I want to make them fight me in somewhat unfavourable conditions and hold them up as long as possible. So to that end, I've got grotesques with gargoyles. I'm going to park the gargoyles in front of the grotesques at some point when the critical moment arrives, so that the grotesques cannot be multi-charged. The hope is that the grotesques then survive the first charge and then counter-charge whatever was there with the half-breeds waiting behind, and maybe Bracky goes that way as well, potentially. You can see I'm not even aiming my rocket launcher anywhere near the flyers because they can just hide and fly out of its arc, maybe. So I'm just aiming over there because I want to put damage onto the knights very early if I can, and get Susan to finish them off, hopefully. That's the plan for the rocket launcher. And all our tokens are over on this side, so I'm kind of just using this side of the table for delaying tactics to hold up those 3 extremely expensive units. That's like half the points of the enemy army almost over there, and I have not put that many points over there by comparison. I've got most of my stuff over here. So we'll see if I can successfully hold them up and stop them being a threat. If you can force them to attack you, they're no longer a threat, kind of. Once they're looking at you, they're a threat. Once they hit you, they're in the ground and you're now fighting them. So if you manage to position well enough so that you don't die immediately and that you can hit them back with something, suddenly they're no longer a threat to the flank of your army. So you want to entice them in to actually attack you rather than flapping around and becoming exponentially more of a threat the more they get round the back of your army. So all my tokens are on the Immortal Guard for now because they're the slowest unit, and then later on in the game I'll try and drop them onto other units. Then, over on this side, as mentioned, we've got a few fast units to deter the enemy dragons. There's the 2 dragons and the dracons. On this side we've got the spears, this is the bow unit there, we've got the knights, and this is the more hard-hitting infantry regiment there, and the elven hero. And there's the spellcaster behind there. So all my tokens on that unit. Turn 1 for me. And I think I want to go first here because I don't want the enemy to start looking into my flanks before I've even moved. So, Bracky. He is a deterrent. The enemy can't just fly and land here and just willy-nilly threaten my entire army, because Bracky could charge it, do a wound, and kind of lock it down a bit, which would be fine by me, and it takes one of the enemy flyers out the game, at least for a while, because I want to advance up here without worrying about being flanked. So Bracky is forming kind of a buffer between my army and the flyers. On this side, I've just positioned my grotesques so that when the enemy come forward, they won't be immediately looking at my flank. I've moved these half-breeds back a bit because they're actually going to be supporting this direction and they're getting out of the way of the rocket launcher firing. The gargoyles don't want to go forward yet because they'll get shot. Same goes for these ones, they're just going to hide until the time comes to jump out in front. My flyer behind the Immortal Guard and grotesque champion, should I say, behind the hill. Susan is on the hill and she's put herself intentionally to within charge range of the knights. She can't see them over the hill, so she wants to draw them out. That is a unit I'm targeting. I want to get rid of it. I don't want to be fighting the spears, I want to be fighting the knights. So if I can get them to charge me, I can then hit them with a billion different things and then throw gargoyles out to block the other things that I don't want to fight so much. And I've got Bracky, who can maybe charge into the horde there if the enemy don't come close to him with the flyers. So I think I've got tools. I just need to break up this formation a bit, because when they're that solid, they are difficult. If they stay there, of course, then Susan can charge the knights, Bracky can charge the archers, and then everyone else can push forward, as long as they're not threatening to flank me with the flyers, which hopefully I've got deterrents to here. If they come too close, Bracky's going in. So, let's see if we can draw out the knights. I've shot them with 2 points of damage from the rocket launcher. Immediately after deployment, I didn't really like the idea of all these dragons staring into my flank, so I think I've done as best I can to limit what they can do now, to threaten me. turn one for the enemy. So this hero charges into Bracky, and I'm actually going to wind back to the enemy list for a second, because who is this? It's the Elven King, and let's have a look what's so good about him. Brew of Strength. So he's got Crushing Strength 2 with Elite with 5 attacks. He's got a Saber-toothed Hunting Cat and Inspiring Individual and the Shard Blade. Now, does he have Duelist? That's what I am remembering from the game. I don't see it on here, but I'm assuming one of those things gives him Duelist. So I'm not reading it there, but he does have it. So, let's go back. Because I wasn't aware that he had it, because it's not on the list. Or it's not on that part of the list, should I say. There's going to be another page with special rules, but normally it adds the special rule to the bottom line, but for some reason it hasn't here. So I wasn't aware of Duelist being on this hero. So he's charged Bracky. He's actually a really good choice to do that, but he's gone over a wall. And it is the cat that gives Duelist, according to Bart. Yep, so he's gone over the wall, so he's going to be hindered. So it's not a guaranteed kill, and if he doesn't kill Bracky, Bracky is a nuisance. And the spears have come forward. Obviously, those are the units my enemy wants me to engage, because they have phalanx, and all my units would be limited by that. The flyers are positioning themselves around in an annoying fashion, just trying to encircle, but as you can see, they've not come too close because they don't want to get Brackied. However, because Bracky's been charged in the flank here, I don't know whether Bracky would even have been able to charge over there, because I don't think my free pivot would have been in effect, because I'd be pivoting into this enemy. So, I don't know. Would I be able to just declare a charge with my side? I don't think so, but someone let me know if that's your understanding of the rules. Now, they've spread out, but it's still not so big of a circle that I'm concerned yet. Because if I throw the gargoyles in front, I can make sure that they can only hit me with one unit. So, Susan just takes some shooting damage. The Immortal Guard takes some shooting damage. Bracky takes 8 wounds, but does not die, does not become wavered. So that is great. So Bracky can now go off willy-nilly. And what Bracky wants to do is shut down the enemy shooting horde, which is exactly what he's going to do. On to my turn 2. So Susan, straight into the knights. Take away their Thunderous, do some damage. 6 wounds. Good job, Susan. Good start. Bracky damages the horde of archers, so they're not going to be shooting. And he regenerates some of his wounds as well, which is great. Gargoyles into the spears. That's the one unit I want fighting them, because I don't care about the gargoyles. The grotesques steam in there and obliterate the champion, the Elf Lord, which is amazing. And they've put themselves in a position where they are now facing this way, because they don't want to get flanked or reared, of course, by this dragon. And the dragon would be hesitant to charge them in the front, because it won't kill them in one round. Very unlikely. So, killing that lord, quite a big deal. And you can see I've got the gargoyles positioned there, so only one of these units could charge the grotesques. And obviously they could all charge the gargoyles if they want, but that would just be fun times for me. And the half-breeds are positioned. This is the one with the boots of striding, importantly, so it doesn't matter about that wall. So anyone that wants to attack down here is going to have to worry about them coming in as well. So I think I've got quite a good defensive position set up against this flank attack now. Now, if you were the enemy, what would you do in this position? I'm not sure if I would throw anything in yet. Hitting one unit into the grotesques, I think, is risky. I would be seriously tempted to start circling this guy round here, and maybe, if you can get in range, doing some dragon breath. If not, just land down here somewhere and just stare at my flank and threaten with these guys. Maybe you're concerned that the gargoyles will charge you and do a point of damage and lock you down, but if you've got another dragon down here, keep it out of range of these grotesques, obviously. But if you're threatening me from here and from here, these grotesques can only look in one direction. So I think that would be an interesting choice, rather than throwing them in. And over here, what would you do as the enemy now? because I've moved up, I've given you options to charge, but you can't double charge the Grotesque Champion because I've overlapped the front of the Immortal Guard there, so you can't fit enough units in. I don't even think you can double charge the Immortal Guard because of the angles involved. You could definitely charge one unit into each with a single pivot, I think. These guys are kind of stuck, but maybe they can charge the Immortal Guard, possibly the archers, if you wanted to do that. They are elite in close combat. So turn 2 for the elves. What are they going to do? Well, they're going to countercharge the gargoyles, obviously. And they're going to countercharge Susan. This dragon, okay, the dragon over here decides to flank charge the gargoyles, which is a move I did not see coming, but it does bring this dragon into play here, which is not a bad thing because he's obviously not feeling confident in this area at all now that Bracky's got through and the Lord is dead and Susan's in there. Doesn't want this area to crumble. This is where all the tokens are, so the dragon obviously thinks if I charge in there, these grotesques can't hurt me, I've just got the freedom to look at the rest of the enemy now, and goes in. And the horde of archers go into the Immortal Guard. These two are kind of stuck back now though. The Drakons do take on the charge into the Grotesque Horde, just the one unit though, because I didn't leave a big enough gap for anyone else. And the other dragon flank charges the gargoyles in front of them. So, interesting, because what could end up happening here, if the gargoyles get killed, if this guy goes forward and this unit doesn't die, I might get a flank charge on the dragon. If he doesn't go forward, the gargoyles die and the grotesques live, they would have a flank charge on the Drakons. So, interesting dilemma. There is a sweet spot where neither of those things could be possible, I think, but you would have to roll a very specific number. So, interesting. Obviously, if you kill both units, that's not particularly relevant, but because of the situation here now, my grotesques are facing this way, so I've actually got multiple threats aimed in this direction. And we've now grounded all the flyers. They're all locked down fighting, which is part of the battle won against a big flying army like this. Once they're down on the ground, that's stage 1 done. Bracky gets wavered by enemy shooting magic, so he can't do anything next turn because he only has Fury. The gargoyles are killed there, of course. And Susan is wavered as well, which is sad because it means that she can't countercharge the knights. Let's see, Nigel says, Susan equivalent, elf king on foot with character upgrades and wings artifact. There may be 1 or 2 units that can do a similar job to Susan, but the ones that I would think of, like the Dwarf King or the Abyssal Dwarf Overmaster on foot, who you could then put wings onto, I don't think they quite have the number of attacks that she does. Maybe a Vampire Lord on foot with the wings would be a close equivalent. That sounds like it would get quite expensive. When I used to run Undead back in the day in 2nd edition, I had the Vampire on Pegasus, and I used to run a Vampire on a horse with the wings, because that way he would be taller than all my infantry, and he could fly over them. And I found that was quite a fun combo to use back in the day. So, the Immortal Guard takes 7 damage from the archers, but if you notice this situation here, so, in the previous games you'll notice my opponents got blocked up quite a lot, blocked behind their own units. In this situation, what I've tried to do is minimise the chance of that happening. So, if you only engage the Immortal Guard, this guy's nimble, he can get out, which means the half-breeds can then join in the fight here. This guy flies, so he can obviously get over it. I don't have anyone that's going to be blocked in at the back, basically, unable to fight. The grotesques get killed, so they only take 11 damage, which is still quite a lot. And that requires you to roll then 7 to get rid of them. So I was hoping they would live, but 11 is quite a lot of damage to take. And the Drakons then face off that way, which makes them a threat, but I can hit them in the front with my half-breeds now. The gargoyles then die as well. So the 2 enemy flyers do their job, clear out this area, but importantly I am looking at them. Turn 3 for me. So Susan backs away a bit. The Grotesque Champion takes over into the Knights, into the Knights, and wavers them, which is fine. Gives Susan more time to recover. The Half-Breeds and the Immortal Guard kill off the horde of archers. And Bracky just shuffles around and stays out of everyone's charge arc, and everyone else turns around in such a way that this dragon isn't going to have an easy charge on them. The one charge he does have is a flank into the Grotesque Champion, because I only wavered the Knights rather than finishing them off, which is sad. The Half-Breeds swarm there into the Draken Riders and waver them, which is a really good result actually, considering they weren't damaged at all, and I've brought the Grotesques closer, because my guess here is that they're going to back away, the dragon is going to charge in, do some decent damage but not enough to kill them. I could then double charge the dragon with these two, because I've brought the Grotesques close enough. I would kill the dragon in one round with both of them combined, and then the Draken Riders would then have recovered, and they'd come in and kill one of these units, probably, and then the other unit I've got left would then kill the Draken Riders. So, just playing it out as it should go, I think I would end up winning this trade-off here, because of that waver. Bart says, not sure about the Grotesque Champ, seems a bit too pricey. He is pricey, but the way I look at it, he is only 1 point of nerve off being a Grotesque Horde. So, depends how you play him. He's obviously got way less attacks, so you have to pick and choose where to put him in to maximise his output. Because if you get him into a flank, he's probably going to get more wounds on a unit than the Grotesque Horde is, because he hits on 3s rather than 4s. So, looking for flanks with that guy on a small base, and getting him in between gaps, being nimble. He is expensive, but I do like his profile. It's just there's a lot of really good stuff in the Abyssal Dwarf list now, so it's tough competition. Right, so we've got the Spearmen into the Immortal Guard. We've got the more elite fighting infantry unit who have the tokens into the Half-Breeds, so they could potentially do something there. And the dragon into the flank of the Grotesque Champion. Now, let's see what they can do. So, as predicted, the Draken's back up and the dragon goes into the Half-Breeds. And Bracky takes some more lightning bolt or some other magic damage, but he's not wavered this time, which is important, so he can actually contribute next turn. Half-Breeds take 8 wounds, but nothing. No waver. Look at this, the Grotesque Champion takes 11 wounds in the flank, which is a reasonable amount. It would have about 20 attacks hitting on 3s with elite and then wounding on 2s, so you would probably hope for a little bit more than 11, but then doesn't kill the Grotesque Champion. 11 wounds, so you would need a 6 to kill it, and couldn't even waver it. So that is a big deal. The dragon's now facing nothing, and I've got a chance to finish off the Knights now. The Half-Breeds get wavered by the elite Elven infantry there, but that's fine because we've got Fury now, and the Immortal Guard are going to be fine as well because they're only fighting from a Spearman, and that all went very well. And my opponent was not too thrilled about this situation with the dragon not killing the Grotesque Champion in one go, but it can happen, especially if you've got an inspired unit and you need to roll what was it I said, 6 on the dice twice to kill it. But not even wavering it is obviously disappointing, but it does have Fury. But the fact that it has Fury meant that it would have only been able to countercharge, and what I really want him to do is just finish off the Knights, because Susan can't see the Knights. So Susan is going to attack the dragon. So onto my turn 4. The Half-Breeds kill off the Elven Infantry Regiment and steal their tokens. The Immortal Guard, hold on, let's go back a sec. So these Spearmen get double charged, I think, by the Immortal Guard and my Big Flyer. So they get killed as well. Or actually my Big Flyer hits something else. I think my Flyer might hit this guy at the back. And the Immortal Guard finish them off. So we just completely clear out this area, apart from the dragon. And yeah, Susan decides actually not to hit the dragon, because she's not going to kill it. And there's a risk that she could then end up getting hit back and overrun into the Grotesque Champion, and both of them could get killed perhaps. So the Grotesque Champion kills off the Knights, turns to face the dragon, and now we've got everyone in a position to murder this dragon when it kills the Grotesque Champion next turn. And if it wants to fly away, then of course Susan can chase it down, so it's got really nowhere to hide. But what's this? The Grotesques and the Half-Breeds double charge the dragon. This is phase 2 of my predicted situation here. But unfortunately, double won the dragon. So that could actually cost me this area of the battlefield. It's lucky the other side's going well also, because otherwise this would be really bad. So the dragon gets a reprieve and gets to live. On the plus side, because the Drakons can't see through the dragon, they cannot double charge one of these units. If they could, that would be instant death for one of them. So the dragon is on 1 billion wounds. The Drakons are on 1 billion wounds. But they're going to be able to attack both of my units next turn. So they could get lucky and kill both of them. Interesting development. You can see Bracky has come down here as well. I think Bracky may have charged that individual as well. Turn 4 for the enemy. So the dragon goes into the half-breeds, the Drakons go into the Grotesques, with all their wounds that they've taken. Does Susan maybe get wavered by magic there? I'm not sure if that's actually her token. But the dragon's obviously going to try and finish off the Grotesque champion. And it looks like my half-breeds get wavered by enemy magic, or being charged by this guy. Is that the standard bearer with Pipes of Terror, perhaps? The dragon takes off the Grotesque champion at second attempt, turns around to face me, but is going to get horribly murderlated. Despite them being wavered, is going to get hit by many things, probably. Although, I may go strategic and just throw in my big flyer and lock it down, because these two units have got the tokens. Now, being wavered in combat by this standard bearer means they can still countercharge and murder it, so they should be safe. And the half-breeds are killed by the dragon, who got double wand. And then it backs up a bit. The Grotesques are not killed, importantly, so they're going to be able to finish off that unit. Turn 5 for me. So the Grotesques finish off the Drakons and then turn to face the dragon, as you'd expect. And they get lots of their wounds back as well through regeneration. My flyer, who is there because the base, just because his head's so pokey, the enemy dragon, so he's charged in there, done a bit of damage, just locked them down. Killed this standard bearer there and turned to face the dragon with all the tokens. Other tokens on Immortal Guard. Bracky is hanging out there. And there is this Elven Mage up there as well, still alive. Susan is going off this way, because of a feeling she might be required to finish off that dragon. If that can kill the Grotesques, she'll go in and try and finish that off. Which is kind of sad, because there's going to be a token I can't pick up now. So, enemy turn, we've got a counter charge here. The Grotesques are killed by the dragon, which means I'm not going to be able to pick up the middle loot counter. And yeah, not much damage done there. So my turn 6. Now, in this situation, there is something better that I could do that I don't do. So, these two units both have 3 tokens on them, and they're in the enemy half, so they're each worth 2 points to me. But the cap is 5 points for a scenario in this tournament. So in order to score more victory points, and thus more tournament points, I would have to drop one of these tokens and pick it up with my flyer, which is definitely doable. However, this dragon is undamaged. Charging it in the flank, while likely to kill it, is not a guarantee. And if I do not kill the dragon, and it countercharges the half-breeds, it would almost certainly steal the tokens off them, because they're so close to death. So, I want to throw things into combat. I can't throw Bracky in, because he can't see it. I've got my flyer in the front. I've got these guys in the flank. Would it be possible to get my flyer out of there onto the token if the Immortal Guard leave one behind? I'm not 100% sure. I think actually it would be possible to get... I don't know actually, because I'm in combat, so I don't know whether I would have been able to pick it up. I could have set it up better to give the dragon, to give my big flyer a token earlier on. I don't know about now. I don't know if it is actually possible. So, Susan steams in there and finishes off the Drakons. And obviously the dragon gets murdered. and everyone else is just shuffling around. I kill off the caster with Bracky, so there's just one mage left. That dragon's dead. So another really big score, and that's 3 massive wins and 1 loss with a good score so far. And here's some pictures of the armies, so obviously more pictures of mine, which you will have already seen. We've got some very nice Northern Alliance there. I'm very impressed with this army. So there's extra pictures of some of them. There's the orcs that I faced earlier in round 1, which you've already seen. Very nice. Very nice. There's the Twigletkin that I faced earlier on as well. Very nice. There are some dwarves. Very nice. There are some kingdoms of men. And I meant to actually take more pictures of these because I thought the knights had some very nice individual outfits. Individual heraldry and so on. So they're quite a cool army. Not laid out in a particularly attractive manner across the 2 carry cases, I must say, so you get points docks for that. But they are a very nicely painted army. There are some Empire of Dust, very nice. And the elves that I just played then, very nice. There are some undead with Abyssal Dwarf allies, it looks like. Very nice, but not obviously laid out very well there. And I took some pictures of the trophies as well that we're all competing for. I'm well out of range of the wooden spoon at this stage, but I'm well within striking distance of any of the podium places. So, the standings going into the final round, I am in 2nd place. And I'm in 2nd place by about 7 tournament points, I think. So, if I lose, I'll almost certainly get jumped by whoever wins on table 2. However, it's very unlikely that the loser of table 2 would also jump me, and the table behind them are so far back that I don't think they can jump me either. So if I lose, I'm very likely to still finish in 3rd place if I pick up any points at all in this last round. So, should be guaranteed at least 3rd, hopefully. If table 2 is a draw, it's very possible I could be bumped out of the podium entirely, though. If I win the final game, I have a chance at 1st place. It's not a guarantee, though, because my opponent has won all 4 games up till this point. So if I inflict a good loss on my opponent in the next round, I could win the whole event. To finish 2nd, if I got a really narrow win, perhaps, or even a draw maybe, could get me a 2nd place at the tournament. But most likely outcome is either 1st or 3rd, probably. And looking at who I'm playing against, one of the top players in the UK, if not the world, who has a very high tournament 1st place rate, and looking at the list, combining those 2 factors, I'm not entirely confident. There are a lot of elements in this list that I didn't want to see in a list that I'm facing. So, what are those elements? There's some speed. There is more hard-hitting speed than I have, because there are 2 lords and chimeras. So 2 big dragons. So I did a good job dealing with those in the last game, I thought. So we'll see if I can do it here. There is also a Frostclaw Champion, who is a flying kind of little fighty character, and Frostclaw Riders as well, a horde of those. And they are a bit of a shooty / fighty unit. But the main thing that is an issue for my army, I think, is the Ice Naiads horde. So, what is the issue with this exactly? Well, if I could shoot them off, that would be okay. The issue is that if I have to fight them, they have Ensnare and Phalanx. That means that most of my army is going to be -2 to hit against them and have no Thunderous Charge. So if I'm forced to fight this unit, there is no way I'm getting through them, unless I can force them to expose a flank. And forcing one of the top players to expose a flank is very unlikely. We'll see what I can do though. There are 4 regiments of Pack Hunters who are solid little shooting units who also have Thunderous Charge. So they can shoot you, and if you get close enough, they'll charge you, and they can do a good job there as well. Ice Elementals who can dish out Frozen to nearby enemy units, which then gives benefits to some of the other units down here who gain things like Vicious for attacking frozen units, for instance. 2 Snow Troll Primes, who are, as we saw in a previous game, there was a Snow Troll Prime, quite tough. There is some snow foxes, some chaff who aren't as good as my chaff, obviously, because they're only speed 8. But what else do I have to worry about here? Oh yeah, there's some stealthy going on here as well. So pack hunters are stealthy, snow foxes are stealthy, and that could be an issue for trying to shoot some of them off. So it's control, and as soon as I hear that as well, that is another possible nail in my coffin, because I can't just kind of guard in one corner because I'm just going to lose. Because the enemy's got more scoring units than I do, and can just spread out, hold more table sections, and then just maybe choose not to fight me, and would just be in a winning position. So I have to spread out at least a little bit. Now, you don't have to spread out as much as you might think in control, because it's 6 squares, and if you control each one, you get a victory point. If you control the middle enemy section, you get 2 victory points. So the main area to control is either right here or right here, where you've got the junction of 4 sections all intersecting there. So if you control there or you control there, you've got the potential to hold 4 areas. So it's not actually a huge area you need to cover. But I'm thinking this is quite a bad matchup. There's a lot of speed and there's a lot of good shooting that can be an issue for some of my units, like half-breeds. There are a lot of things that would deter me getting close, like the Horde with Ensnare and Phalanx, which none of my units can really deal with. If I could feed them something that's not particularly useful, but they've got the Hammer of Measured Force as well, so they do a good job killing a lot of my units as well. I think that's just a really tricky matchup. But we're going to see what I can do, because if I don't feel like I can win at some point in the game, I'm just going to try and score points and secure my place in the top 3 for a trophy. So let's see, Dwarven Darkness is here as well, saying spicy time. It is definitely getting spicy at this stage. It's lava versus ice, the ultimate spice fest. Let's see if the lava freezes or if the ice melts. So we've got Susan out on the flank there. She is my sole kind of flank guardian against things like this flyer. And what I would like to do, Bracky is also in a position to threaten this as well. If I can get Susan and Bracky teaming up on a flyer, they could potentially bring it down. So that is what I'm looking for here. And if I can make it charge into difficult terrain, that would be good as well. And everyone else kind of on that area I was talking about, ready to contest this zone. But in a line, and gargoyles hiding at the back because they will get shot off if they're on the front, ready to jump in front when the time comes. But I'm not feeling too confident going into this game. So the enemy have got a Snow Troll Prime there. There's one of the kings on Chimeras. Back there we've got all the birds, another king on Chimera, another Prime. Snow Foxes at the back, and there's the Horde that I'm not confident in killing at all. So, into the first turn. My opponent is going first and advances up somewhat. Now, not a huge amount, but unloads all the shooting into these half-breeds and damages them greatly, but doesn't kill them, so I'm going to be able to throw some gargoyles in front of them next turn and hopefully keep them alive a bit longer. Grotesques take some damage as well, but again, not killed, so that's quite bad, but it could have been worse. Now, I could have deployed outside of the threat range of all the shooter units, but I would be quite far back then, and really I need to close in on them if I'm going to have any chance against them. Really, I would like my individuals, if my individuals could kill this beast here, and then start hassling these shooter units, and also take away their Thunderous Charge in the process, that would be quite a big deal. If I could tie up this whole flank with just Susan and Bracky, that would be really great, but we'll see how it goes. And then the rest of the time, I'm not going to get too flanked over here, because I've got a good solid line. I can stall a bit. We'll see. So I reposition these guys, keep them in the terrain, so if they get charged there's going to be some hindrance there, and also the Grotesque Horde can't get double charged because I've got the champion poking out a little bit. The Grotesque Champion can't get hit by too many units at once because I've got the Immortal Guard there poking out as well. And if you want to charge the Immortal Guard, that's okay, because then everything will just blur and hit you. Gargoyles jump in front to protect the half-breeds, and Susan dips her toe into the woods, so she can now see through the woods. Okay, so what are the enemy going to do from here? Now, having played against this player before, I know he's not going to be needlessly aggressive. He's going to be very patient. He knows that the only way to not win the tournament is by getting absolutely massacred. So if you don't throw everything in, you're not going to get absolutely massacred. So you might as well just stand back a bit, chip away, and then find your spot later. Turn 2 for my opponent. So flies behind my lines, which I'm not as concerned about because he's not able to turn round yet. So if I don't get hexed here, I could turn around and fireball him, but he does have a wizard with hex, unfortunately. This dragon is, or this Lord on Chimera is clearly inviting Susan and Bracky to make hindered charges into it, which I will be more than happy to do, because I want to ground it, stop it eating my flank, and I think they would do enough damage to it still to worry it, and I don't think it would kill one of them in a round. It definitely could. It's way more likely to waver one of them in a round, which means Susan would be the better target for that, because she doesn't have Fury. But overall, I wouldn't be too disappointed if it came into a fight with these two against the Chimera. Everyone else moves up a bit, unloads some more shooting, does some good damage down here. And damage onto those gargoyles, who get wavered. So they're kind of in my way, but at least they're blocking up the enemy shooting. And the half-breeds and the gargoyles over here do get killed, sadly. So, going to have to do something, or we're going to get shot off the table. So what is my plan? Turn 2, push forwards. You can't ignore the Immortal Guard anymore. They're right in your face. You're going to have to fly away. You're going to have to attack something, probably. I've got my flyer behind. He was hexed, so I can't do any spells. Susan and Bracky go into this guy. They do a bit of damage, which has grounded it. So what's it going to do? It'll countercharge, probably Susan. I think it's got 10 attacks, hitting on 3s, and then probably crush 3, so 3s and 2s. So it might waver her. Shouldn't kill her in one round, really. Probably a waver. And then Bracky will hit it again. And probably do about that much damage again. It's very disappointing, actually, only doing 3 wounds with the two of them. They actually rolled quite poorly. It's hitting on 4s between them. You'd expect to do a lot better than that, because Bracky is wounding on 2s as well with Vicious. So you'd expect to do more than 3. The rocket launcher does a couple of wounds to this big horde and then rolls a double 6 and wavers them, so that's nice. Not that they were going to probably go anywhere anyway, particularly exciting. So I'm kind of inviting the enemy in now. Come on, you could stand back and shoot me, or you could make some of these charges that I've just offered you for some of your fast units. I mean, you might have to be crazy to take some of them, but you might. You might want to do it. Turn 4. So this flyer, instead of going after my war machine, which is the mistake one of my earlier opponents made, thinking that it would be easy pickings and then could just turn around after killing it, decides, you know what, I'm not going to risk it. I'm not too worried about that rocket launcher. I'm just going to turn around and be a threat behind you now. And I'm going to keep hexing this guy so he can't fireball you as well if I get the chance. The birds and the other Chimera go into the grotesques there. And Snow Foxes stand in front of the gargoyles, who are going to get shot a bit again. And they take more damage, but they're going to be fine this time. These grotesques take a bit of shooting as well. And the gargoyles don't even get wavered, which is good, because now they can fly off and do something in a minute. And Susan takes 6 points of damage, which means that my opponent has to roll 10 or maybe 9 if it's got brutal or something, twice, and does it. Well, can't do much about that. So Susan's dead. Only 6 wounds, which is about what you'd expect to suffer in the circumstances. But a couple of big nerve rolls and she's gone. So that plan to take out this guy with my 2 individuals and then start hassling the archers, or the spear throwing units more accurately, is not going particularly to plan. And at this point I'm thinking, because Susan's dead, I now think I have 0, well, better than 0, but very little chance to win this game. So I'm going to have to look for something else now. I'm going to have to start just trying to pick up points and secure my place in the top 3 mostly here. The grotesques get killed there. And they reposition here. That's actually where the monster, the Chimera, is there, where the base is, but it won't fit. And the birds turn to face to make sure they're not going to get flanked or recharged by the grotesque champion, and they're out of the arc of the Immortal Guard. Obviously they can be hit by this guy as well. Now, What does open up, though, once I get the laser out to confirm, is that the gargoyles, who have not been wavered, have a rear charge visible on the birds that they can just see past the corner of this base here, of this monster. When it's all positioned correctly afterwards, they can just about see the corner of the unit, as determined by the laser. So, the gargoyles do go in there, this guy goes in as well, and they kill the birds. So that's going to be good for a tournament point, a bonus kill point there. So well done, gargoyles. The Immortal Guard turned just to face the action. Bart says, are you playing Tom Robinson? Yes, I am. It is definitely his kind of list. He even commented on that. He said it's quite similar to his old elf list, I believe were his words. So it is a very strong list, and obviously very strong player. There are certain players, at the moment I think in the UK, there are probably 3 of them, maybe, who seem to dominate when it comes to finishing first. There's 3 I can think of off the top of my head. There may be more who are very strong as well, but 3 main ones. And I haven't played against the other 2. I don't know if I've played against the other 2 ever, actually. So I can't say what their play style is. I haven't really studied them at all. But most of the really top Kings of War players, you assume, probably come from some kind of maths or geometry kind of background, or statistics backgrounds, where they just know exactly what they're going to do because they've mathed it all out in their head immediately. They know what they need to roll. They've got their angles all worked out in advance. So I think those are skills that are very important. I don't know if the 3 people in question all are masters of those particular arts, but they may well be. Okay. Then we've got my Grotesque Champion who charged into the Snow Troll Prime and wavers it, which is okay, but I would rather be killing things. And my Grotesques decide if we stay here, we're just going to get shot to bits, so let's just charge this horde with Phalanx and Ensnare and hit it on 6s on the hill, just to stop us being shot for a turn, and do a wound. And my half-breeds turn round there as well, after killing the Snow Foxes, so they're not going to get hit by this bird, who obviously has a rear charge on the Grotesques, but if they didn't move, they were going to just get shot off anyway. So they're as good as dead. I'm just trying to pick up kills now. Bracky does a few more points of damage onto the Lord on Chimera. And as you can see, it's not looking great, but I am kind of owning this quarter of the board, so I could maybe score a zone at the end of the game if I can hold out long enough. So I could pick up more points and guarantee my place in the top 3. Turn 4. And what's this bird going to do? Where's it going to swoop? Well, we've got Snow Troll Prime and the Horde into the Grotesque, so it doesn't feel like it needs to rear charge them. We have got the Chimera here who's got a choice to make as well. This one countercharges Bracky. I think this one actually just repositions so that I can't charge it with this guy, and then he's going to try and blast off the gargoyles, perhaps? Yeah, because they're dead. They get blasted by something. The half-breeds take some shooting damage. Bracky takes 5 wounds, but he's okay, so he may end up winning this duel, maybe, if he's lucky now. And the Grotesques are obviously dead, but they would have been dead whatever they did, I think. So, again, once Susan died, I felt like it was game over, so it's just about trying to target specific units and kill them, and try and get more bonus points. So, turn 4, instead of doing anything exciting with my flyer, just throw it into a unit and then die, I fly away over here. Because I'm thinking if I keep him alive, he's unit strength 2, I could maybe score a zone with him. Same with the Immortal Guard, they've got good unit strength of 3. They can just kind of skirt the centre line and then decide which area they want to be in to try and hold or contest at the end of the game. The half-breeds really should be fighting something, but they can't, so they're just going to have to turn around and face the death that's coming to them. Grotesque Champion can try and finish off the Snow Troll Prime, and Bracky to try and finish him. So, waver the Snow Troll Prime again, unfortunately. Waver the Big Dragon, which is cool, so Bracky's doing a decent job there. And, yeah, I would prefer to be killing things rather than wavering them. Turn 5 for the enemy. And obviously this guy is wavered, so can't countercharge me, but does regenerate some wounds. And all the Ice Pack Hunters in range decide to charge Bracky, which is quite funny. So he's totally surrounded. And as you can see, got quite close to killing that guy. Snow Troll Prime into the half-breeds. The Horde flank charges the Grotesque Champion from the hill. And this guy turns around and just shoots his Chimera Breath at the Ironcaster there and does a few wounds, and he's a bit frozen as well. Bracky is killed by this swarm of troops. The half-breeds are wavered, which is okay because they can countercharge. So hopefully I'll pick up another kill there. And the Grotesque Champion is killed as well. So again, just trying to get some bonus points now. Turn 5, Immortal Guard just moving away from the enemy, flying away from the enemy there. The half-breeds go in there. They don't kill Snow Troll Primes. They're of course going to die. And turn 6 for the enemy. Swarm in to kill the half-breeds. And it's looking like I'll hold this table section because I've got these guys and I've got unit strength 5 there. And the enemy have only got this guy in there, really. So, he actually flies over here and tries to flame him off the table, I think. And my rocket launcher, I think that gets killed. And half-breeds are dead. So for my turn 6, I'm not really going to do anything. All I need to do is just secure this table section. This is the only one I can hold, so it's going to get me a bonus point in the tournament at least, which should secure 3rd place. So there we go, that's all I'm going to do, just secure this area. And obviously that did not go well, but it does mean I secured the 3rd place trophy, which I'm pretty happy with. I got 3 enormous wins, only dropping 1 point in those wins. I got one very creditable loss, should I say, where I scored a lot of points in the loss, and then this one, which was a combination of going up against one of the top players with a list that's very difficult for my list. It has the one unit that is a perfect counter to my entire army, which is an ensnaring phalanx horde, which is very, very difficult to deal with. It's also got good shooting, which my army can't deal with that well. I don't have the high defense that I would have with like a golem army. I think a golem army would have been a more difficult proposition for this lot to face, possibly. With the higher defense, I would have been very difficult to hurt with the shooting, and I would have had healing as well. Whether I would have been able to actually take the fight to them, because I would have been so slow, is another matter. So I would have had to be relying on the likes of Susan to get some serious work done in that situation. I probably would have lost less units, but I maybe wouldn't have been able to even chase them down to kill them with the golems. So I think that was a pretty solid tournament performance there with a good list, I think. I think my list was strong and pleased with that 3rd place. So I'm going to go back a little bit to a picture of my army, which I took before the last game when the best painting was being judged. And once we get there, I'm going to just talk through the elements and how they worked. So I'm not going to just hold down the button here and just go through the pictures at 100 miles an hour, because I'm sure that gave people a headache when I tried that last time. I actually went back and edited out the part of the video where I did that, because I think that was such a nightmare. So, we're almost there. Okay, so here is my army. The Katsachan rocket launcher, first time I've taken it to a tournament ever. It did its job pretty well. Its highlight was obviously the first turn of game 1 where it killed a unit with a 6/6 with just 1 damage. It reliably does about 1 damage a turn, which for 85 points with 48-inch range is okay. It kind of did the job it was in the list to do. What else would you put in for that price? You would put in another unit of gargoyles, which maybe you would get more out of, possibly. You could also get the Dragonfire team, who's had a slight buff with an extra bit of range, and I think it got faster as well, didn't it, the Dragonfire team? So I have got one of those painted as well, so that's another bit of competition for it. A bit of breath attack, but not long range at all, and it doesn't have piercing, so it's not quite a War Trombone, unfortunately. It does have Vicious, which, as we know, isn't as good as piercing, but it's okay. So I think the rocket launcher did a decent enough job. I'm not expecting it to be spectacular, and there will be an occasion where it just hits with all its attacks and does about 8 wounds to something and just takes it off the table. It will happen eventually. But what I like about it is that even when it doesn't have that ridiculous spike roll, it still does little bits of reliable plink damage because of the number of attacks it has. So really long range and a little bit of damage. And the fact that it can hold an area or an objective now as well, I don't think that's a bad choice at all. The Grotesque Champion. He is 220 points, which is more expensive than, for example, a regiment of half-breeds. What does he have? He has a lot going for him. He's got a really good profile and special rules. He is just expensive. Is he too expensive to put in a list that's already low on unit strength? I'm undecided. Because what you could have in here instead of him is ditch a couple of the upgrades and put in another horde of actual grotesques instead of him. You're not far off putting in a Hellfane either. If you take away some of the upgrades on the other units, you can fit in a Hellfane definitely with those points. So that's the kind of point level he's competing at now. He's only 45 points less, I think, than a Hellfane. So those are the units that he's now in competition with, rather than the half-breed champion, which was his previous competition when they were both about 140 points, I think, ish, in the last book. So it's tough because he is expensive, but I really like his profile. I'm sure there's a way to get more out of him. I think the fact that I use Susan and Bracky in the list for the kind of job that you might want him to do. He's obviously not as good at doing that job because he's not an individual, so I'd hesitate to use him in that role. He's not as fast either. I do like him. Maybe combining him with Grotesques isn't always the best thing because they both have Brutal and it doesn't stack. So maybe throwing him in alongside the half-breeds would be a better choice. Because if there's a unit that is too tough for the half-breeds to kill, which the half-breeds are quite good at killing most things, but there are units they're not going to take out in one go. Maybe throwing him in with them could be the way to go. Adding the Brutal, and he's reliable just like they are at dealing their damage, hitting on 3s. The Immortal Guard with Infernal Wardens, is it an auto-take upgrade if you've got the points? I think it is now. Giving them Crushing Strength 1 actually makes them a lot more dangerous in the game. Crushing Strength 1 with Vicious, hitting on 3s with 12 attacks, is actually quite a dangerous unit. And the fact that they're Dash 17 with Defense 5 means that they're still just as tough to take out as they always are. I was running them before they had the upgrade option. So I like that. For 175 points, I think that's a pretty damn solid unit, with unit strength 3 as well. I think they're a good choice. And yeah, it's definitely amazing keeping defense 5 with the crushing strength 1. I think that makes them very, very viable now. And possibly taking 2 of them with... the Hellfane still has ways of buffing infantry, doesn't it? However, I'm not sure... Does the Hellfane still give wild charge to infantry? Because if it does, I'm not sure that's the best thing for them, because it doesn't make them much faster. I think they're still going to be slower than everything else. Yeah, so I don't think giving wild charge to something that's already pitifully slow is actually a good choice. I don't really rate that. Maybe adding wild charge to... It might be better on the Berserkers than the Immortal Guard, perhaps. The Grotesques, with all the new upgrades on them, I was clearly running them already, despite the lack of Fury and Strider. So a 5-point increase for those 2 rules makes them, I would say, an auto-include in a list. Are they now the best unit in the entire army for 250 points? A case could be made. The Lesser Obsidian Golems are still very, very, very good. But the balance is definitely shifting in favour of the Grotesques, I think, now. The Fury and Strider are rules that you would have bought previously for the units. And in an army that was seriously lacking any Strider and Pathfinder access before, you really only have access to it through taking the Greater Golem or a Hellfane, and then the boots. Whereas now, if you're taking the Grotesques and the Grotesque Champion, and the boots on one of your other units, you can have most of your fighting force having Strider, which makes a huge difference to how killy they are, because obviously when they're hindered, they're hitting on 5s. This list in general is obviously vulnerable to facing Phalanx. It's heavily reliant on cavalry and flying units and thunderous charge. So if there's a lot of Phalanx floating about, maybe this list is a bit too one-dimensional for that. But this is a list obviously I was working on and building without the changes in mind. It's this kind of list I was going to run. I put together a list with the Ironcaster big flying iron caster before it got its buffs. I was just trying to find the right balance of other units in the list. And I'm just very pleased that all the units that I painted up specifically for this kind of list got a buff immediately after I finished painting them, which was great. I had no inside knowledge of that at all. I'd heard whispers that maybe half-breeds were going to improve a bit, and they did. They got the extra point of nerve, which is quite a big deal for them, since that was the one thing holding them back, because most of their special abilities that you're paying points for are reliant on them being alive. Like your Fury and Regeneration. It's no good if you're dead. So, yeah, anything else in here? Bracky, I think gaining Fury as well is a big deal. Because he does get wavered quite a bit. And that's really one of the only downsides to him. So the fact that they've taken that away and given him Fury is great. It's not the kind of thing you would waver from shooting, obviously, with him being individual. That's quite a tricky thing to do. What about other choices, though? Because I could now put out 2 Abyssal Dwarf armies with totally different units, probably now. The big Defense 6 army is still viable, I think. Some of the units that complement that got buffs as well. And it's going to be interesting selecting an army going forward. Decimators got buffed as well. I've got some of those. I could run Decimators. Basically, the point levels of tournaments are just too low, because I want to run my entire Abyssal Dwarf collection now, because every single unit you could argue is viable and strong at this point. There's nothing in the list where I think, no, that's terrible, I'm never going to take that. And even the ones that I think may be overpriced for what they do, like the Flying Overmaster with the big beast, I think he's a bit too expensive. I think the Hellfane maybe is a bit expensive as well. Those two, possibly. I do like them still, though. I don't think they're terrible by any means. I'm going to keep trying this Fast Abyssal Dwarf list for a little while, I think. I like it, and why not, if they've just been buffed. I've already submitted my list for a tournament next weekend, which is just a one-dayer, and it's only 2,000 points. So, quite a similar list to this. I'm not going to spoil it too much, but... Let's see, Bart says, did you find you used the extra heal a lot with the flyer? A lot would be putting it strongly. I did use it a few times. The extra heal, I did use heal on its own, but I think because Fireball is so short range, by the time you're that close to the enemy, you're probably either sending everything into combat, and the flyer is maybe looking for something else behind enemy lines to be doing, because it's quite versatile. So... yeah, there weren't that many times where I did the Fireball and the heal immediately afterwards. So if he had Lightning Bolt instead of Fireball, it would be an absolutely amazing must-include unit in the army. Because you could just walk up behind your cavalry, they would take shooting damage, you would Lightning Bolt off at something, and then just heal the unit next to you, or in front of you, or behind you. As it is, by the time you get that close to the enemy, you are spreading out a bit as well. And because it's a big flyer, flanks will be open to it because it can see over every other unit in your army. And there were a few occasions at this event where I was able to find flanks with him, which is a good role for him because getting into the flank, seeing attacks on 4s with Crushing Strength 3 and Vicious is definitely not to be sniffed at all. So, I like him a lot. The 2-spell thing I think is something they should do more of in Kings of War, because casters are kind of limited because none of the spells are too powerful in this game. I think they've tinkered when they've added spells in the past that maybe they felt went too far, or maybe were too good, so they've drawn some of them back in again. As it is, I don't think any of the spells right now are game breaking, so why not give a very expensive caster access to 2 at once? I think there's one other unit that can do 2 spells, and there might be an artifact where once per game you can do 2 spells, is there? Is it Morgoth can do 2? There may be others, but I think there should be more. If it's a really, really expensive caster, especially one like this bad boy, where you're paying a lot of points for kind of conflicting rules, because you're paying a lot of points for his spells, and you're paying points for the fact that he could do some serious damage in combat as well. Crushing Strength 3, you're not going to get that for free. So you're paying points for things that you're not going to use all at the same time. So moving him up blasting the enemy, healing your troops, and then when the time comes, leaping on an enemy flank when things have opened up a bit while you're hiding at a safe distance until that moment arrives, I think makes him a very solid choice now. Very cool. And I think that about wraps this one up. So you can look forward to another tournament report next weekend, and then the day after that, immediately, there is a Dead Zone tournament as well. So 2 reports coming up next weekend. And Bart says, very entertaining few hours, thanks for the report. Well, I like to think that these reports are informative and entertaining. I like to think that not only am I teaching people how to beat me, which is the obvious takeaway from this, I'm teaching people how to apply some of the thinking that I use in games as the top-ranked UK Abyssal Dwarf player, so clearly an expert in all things Kings of War based on that alone. And I am currently lined up to qualify for the Masters based on Best in Faction for the Abyssal Dwarves, but there are more tournaments to be played. So there are 2 players in the Abyssal Dwarf rankings who are not far behind me. So if they're playing in more tournaments before the end of the season, they do have the opportunity to jump ahead of me. If not, then I might just be creeping into the top 16 on the back of this 3rd place result anyway. I'm definitely going to be close to it, so I could qualify on that basis actually. I'm going to keep my eye on the Masters rankings over the next week or so as all the results come in. And Bart has just donated money to the channel, which is precisely what everyone should be doing, donating all their life savings to this channel so that I can just attend weekly tournaments all around the country, playing Kings of War, explaining how I lost, and telling you precisely what my tactics were so you can either use them or spot them when your opponent's trying to use them. And yeah, that is one of the cool things actually, when I'm at an event and occasionally someone will come up to me and say, hey, I used that thing that I saw in your video and it worked. And that feels pretty good. Because the majority of the ranked players obviously don't do in-depth, detailed video analysis of their games and tell you exactly what they're thinking. I can't think of anyone who actually does it, apart from me, who is anywhere near the top of the rankings, at least in the UK. So let me know if there are any others, because maybe I'd like to watch them as well. Okay, I think that's about it for this evening. It's been quite a long one, but there were 5 red hot spicy Abyssal Dwarf infested games there. And don't forget to like the video, obviously. If you're watching this and haven't liked it, what is wrong with you? And subscribe, of course, and check out all the links in the description, all the various social media. There's Twitter, Discord server, there's Facebook group, and obviously give me all your life savings, because what are you going to do with it, really? How could you spend it better than by donating it to this channel, sending me to more tournaments with more armies, and allowing me to deliver this content direct to your screen so you can improve your Kings of War play and learn to crush your opponents in the same way that I do, and learn to avoid getting crushed in the way that I got crushed occasionally. I don't think money can buy you any greater gift than that. And with that, all that remains to be said is, good night out there, whatever you are.